So everyone, we are joined here today by the development team at Wrong Organ, who you guys know as the developers of Mouthwashing, and the upcoming developers of CARCASS CLAD. I know as the people who have given me far too many obsessions that I think about far too frequently. So it's nice here to finally get to talk to my sleep paralysis demons. Here, get to hear their side of the story. But no, they're an incredibly talented team. And I'm happy to talk today about their previous games and a very exciting game upcoming. But for now, if you guys just want to go ahead and introduce yourself for the audience.
Hello,
Sure.
hello. Sorry.
No worries.
No, I'm Jeffrey. Everyone here, like, we're actually the original three people that did How Fish is Made, our like very first game. So on that and the studio now, I'm our like gameplay direction guy, programming, all of that stuff.
Excellent. Nice.
Yeah, my name is Johanna Kasurinen. I'm our narrative designer and sort of like art lead, I would say.
Cool. Very cool.
And I'm Martin. I'm the sound designer and composer of the group. Do all of that like spooky sound stuff. Also the like original suite of the group.
So were you
Mhm.
like the first Swede and then you dragged everyone over? Is that
Yeah. Sorry. Well, actually, I think Jeffrey, if you want to tell the story, but we all met through school, a Swedish school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like we all have different reasons for being here, but we were at a school that took like a lot of internationals. So it happened that like we were all in class studying in Stockholm, but then there was just of the people that decided to start it, there was like one Swede, and everyone else
Oh.
in a different country.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I read somewhere, and I maybe misremember, was the fish game part of an assignment through that school, or like your all's first project together? Like while
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it was so we had just started the school and then the like original design document was the one that I had because you had to make a design document to get into the school and the pretty much the entire like design of how fish is made was my application that I got in with. And then I ended up missing part of the like first semester of school, and then I had to make up for that time somehow. So I just kind of went to ask the teachers like, would I be able to just finish this little fish game that I planned and get the like credits via that? Because Jeffrey had approached me because I we had just been like showing off our the game design documents that we got into the school with over lunch and everything, and I was just like, oh, I made these fish models and the script was pretty much written and stuff. So Jeff was just like, oh, this should be like a really easy thing for us to put together fast and get like this sort of fast win, if you will. And then I had just randomly been put into one of a previous project with Martin. So I was like, oh, Martin can do the sound for us. So it really was like this kind of very like a lot of random things
Mhm.
coming together. So we ended up technically making How Fish is Made during school, but we were doing it outside of school time because
I
it
see.
was to get me like extra or the
Yeah,
credit that
yeah.
I was missing. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. And I feel like I don't think I really knew because I feel like the first time I heard wrong organ was with mouthwashing, but I feel like I remember watching a bunch of Let's Players playing How Fish is Made before like the mouthwashing hype. So around when, how long from you guys like making that in school to it getting traction was there? Was it immediate? Was there like
It was
time in between?
pretty fast. It was actually a really similar like route that mouse washing had, where like at a different, obviously a smaller scale, but like because we shipped the game with not a whole lot of excitement. It was like I think like our numbers on Steam were great. We had trouble getting traction like before launch, but then like it went out and we had pretty much no expectations for it, and then it just went like straight up. It was crazy. Um, and so it came in a few waves. It's like a couple people played on launch, and then the first wave of YouTubers played, and then the second wave of content creators, and it just keeps kind of exploding from there, which is honestly pretty similar to mouse washing too. Like mouse washing didn't blow up instantly. But yeah, it was for like students though, it was crazy. It was like I mean, it was like we had absolutely 0% expected it to go anywhere. And then for the standards, like I think on Steam, it has like 150,000, like quote unquote purchases, at this point, like which for like student project was like, like unthinkably good.
Yeah.
Um, And then so I think at that point it was kind of like cemented that we had something that we could grow into something else. And then so we did make another game, and then we canceled that game, and then felt really sad about canceling that game, and then we made
Yeah.
Mousewashing because of how sad we felt about canceling that game.
Yeah.
That one did
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, well, hope that whole mouthwashing thing works out, whatever that.
Yeah.
So,
And there was like before that came out as well. I think it's easy to look back and think that we kind of expected mouthwashing to do really well, but that was absolutely not the case. At least for me.
mm.
Like I was absolutely terrified when we put it out.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say because there are other games that came out that it used kind of these big sci-fi horror settings to tell personal stories and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like mouthwashing was so, at least for me, it was so surprising in the narrative that was told in the midst of it in a good way. Because, like, I went into it, I'm so glad that I had nothing spoiled for me stepping into it. I thought it was like a war game or something. I had no idea what I was getting. I just saw images of Curly, and I'm like, I saw images of Curly bandaged up, and I'm like, oh, it's like you probably got blown up or something. I don't know, which kind of right. But I step into the game and I start playing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like the original Alien movie, like Cargo Crew, haha, whatever. And then it's just like a depressive spiral for like 2 hours. And I was so impressed by managing to tell that story in that world. Before I just get hyper focused on that, you guys coming off of How Fish is Made and then into mouthwashing, there's certainly some similarities in, like, for one, the graphic design, but also kind of some of the more gross details, like, the fleshy stuff and things like that. But tonally, it's completely different. Um, was what was that conversation like? I know you guys said there was a canceled game in between. Um, but did this mouthwashing start as like, I want to tell a story in space, or we want to tell a story about kind of like this crew that has distrust that falls apart? What were the first conversations like for mouthwashing?
I think we spent quite a while trying to find out like what our first game would be when we like became like a corporation, or it started becoming like a serious thing, after the other game got canned. And so we were doing a bunch of ideation and like throwing it around. And this has happened also between Mousewashing and Carcass CLAD, where we'll like normally there'll be all these pitches. And the funny thing is like every time we've ever actually picked up a game, it's not like this iterative thing where we're like slowly building an idea step by step. It's just like someone pitches something and we're like, we're making that. Like, it's just going to be the thing that was on the slideshow. So, like, we threw ideas around for, like, months, and then and Johanna can probably speak about this in a sec, but she just threw us a slideshow that was called, like, Twin Peaks in Space, I think was the name.
Oh, perfect.
But it had, like, pretty much all the building blocks and you would think of Mousewashing having today were detailed on it. Like, all the characters, the core plot points, the setting.
Wow, interesting. So, Johanna, you presented this, and I guess it would be on the presentation. But the core for me, the core of mouthwashing is the discovery of the nature of the protagonist, right? I feel like there's so many good misdirects leading up to it, because you have like Swansea, who's like your stereotypical horror. Like if this was The Shining, that's Jack Nicholson with the axe running around, right? And you have like, you know, Anya, who seems scared of something, so your mind's trying to put together questions like, oh, maybe she's afraid of this, or maybe she's, for a while playing the game at first, I'm like, oh, maybe she, like Curly did something to her, right? Because a lot of games don't put you in the role as the perpetrator. But I think with that choice, it subverted expectations so much that, at least for me, that the realization came much further into the game, and it was all the more powerful for it. Was your idea stepping in to do that, to kind of have this misdirect set up with, you slowly realizing who you're playing as? Or was it kind of just a story about this crew falling apart, a bad actor within the group, and then as you develop the game, you kind of like the veiled hand approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of both, where I knew I wanted Jimmy to be the one who crashed the ship. In the end, like that was part of the initial pitch, and the big misdirect was that we're obviously like all the signs are pointing at Curly, and then
Mhm.
they're sort of pointing at Swansea later in the game. So that was definitely there from the beginning. But then I think like in the original um pitch, like it was just a couple of bullet points like, oh, they thought Captain Curly crashed the ship, but it was actually Jimmy. And then you had like a couple more plot points laid out. But then when we actually started writing it and putting it together, making sure everything like logically made sense and the timeline made sense. Obviously it started refining more, and I was able to focus more on like how to do those misdirects and stuff. And I did find it quite difficult. Like I think that was like a large part of why by the time we were kind of like ready to ship mouthwashing, I was in such a like this such a crappy game is because you've been sitting with that story for so long at that point that relies on twists. And at that point I was like, I was so close to it for so long that I was like, I don't know if the twists are any good anymore. Are they super obvious or like, is it any interesting at all in any sense? So I think, yeah, that's kind of part of what made it difficult to work on for a long time. Because I mean, nowadays I think you see a lot of people being like, "Oh, I'm so sick of mouthwashing." But by the time we released it, I was like, I've been sitting with this thing for I don't know over a year at this point, so I'm sick of mouthwashing too. Yeah.
I think I feel like that's kind of a common thing I hear out of a lot of writers I talk to. Because there comes a point where you're so close to a story, you can't really be, objective about it anymore because you're just so used to, being down the barrel with it. Um, like I remember after I went to the Backrooms premiere with Kane Pixels, and as soon as it was over, he walked up and went, "Was it good?" like he's just so attached to it. It's hard to see out of it. So I totally get that. I also think it's interesting. Like, I wouldn't say the story completely relies on twist because even just thinking about the themes after it's done, like a second playthrough still has value, right? There's stuff you get out of it, but the twists certainly do make those themes hit harder. Um, but I feel like Mouthwashing is a game that is so talked about, especially after I made the video and I kind of interacted with people in like the fandom, so to speak, where people almost forget that there were the twists initially. Because like I titled the video "The Secret Horror of Mouthwash" or "The Secret Monster of Mouthwash," something like that. And at first I got a ton of comments and DMs that were like, "What do you mean secret? Jimmy's obviously evil. What he did to Anya, blah blah blah." And it's like, that you don't know that the first time you start the game. That's like end of the game, you realize. But it's like these people have spent so much time with these characters in either, replaying the game or discussing them and stuff. I feel like weirdly, a lot of the audience is probably in a similar boat you were in the beginning, where they feel so close to the story that a lot of that like outside perspective is kind of gone, which I think is a testament to just how well the characters are written, how much people like them. Because you, especially characters like Swansea and stuff like that, I think you guys did such a great job at making what would otherwise kind of be the foil for Jimmy and the characters. Like man, that last speech, I think about that last speech all the time. It's so impactful. At what point depth like that, like with Swansea, does that come like way later into development? Were these your ideas for the character, like from the get-go, you wanted them to be more layered and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a thing with all of the characters was to have sort of a they appear very one way, like you get this very quick reading on them of who they are, but then they sort of subvert that.
Mhm.
So with like Swansea, it's very obviously like pushing the whole like, oh, he's cranky, he's an alcoholic, and all that kind of stuff. So you setting up certain expectations. The same with Anya, that she's like completely just super nervous and everything
Mhm.
all the time. So yeah, that was part of it. I think that's also why we ended up going with such a small cast of characters, was that like I knew I wouldn't be able to do I could have a lot of characters and have them be a little bit more like, shallower, I guess, or I could have just a very small core group and maybe try and make them a little bit more like go deeper into their sort of psyche or whatever. But I do want to say the video you guys made of mouthwashing doing the voice acting was incredible.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
keep getting asked about that all the time, and like notably one of my sister's husband, like that's like the only like coverage we've ever gotten there where he sent me a message like, "Did you know that was happening?" And I was like, "No, I didn't," and stuff. And yeah, so and they like yeah, he did a great job on doing the Swansea
Oh my
monologue.
gosh.
That is
Yeah.
my yeah, really, really great. It was a real joy to watch. The monologue is my favorite piece of writing in the game, so like to see it, like yeah, being the whole thing done is it was really cool. So thank you for that. It's great.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys for writing it. Yeah, I got all my friends together to do that, and then I did Jimmy obviously because I'm not gonna ask anyone else to do Jimmy.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had my wife do Anya, and it was funny because like I played the whole game, which people made several jokes about. There said that one of the top comments on that video is like, "Wow, I can't believe Wendigoon actually trapped his wife for 9 months in a spaceship just to dedicate himself to the plot. What what a YouTuber." Um, but there was I had played through all of Mouthwashing and I was like writing the video, and then I wrote scripts for everyone to send to them, like, here's your lines. And I had them all color coded so they would know what to read. And my wife came in, she had never seen anything to do with the game. And I'm like, all right, here's Anya's lines. And she was kind of like scrolling through them, just like the first few scenes. And then I was like, and here's like the scenes. And I showed her the scene where she's looking at the mouthwash and Jimmy comes up. She's like, oh, hi, Jimmy, blah, blah, blah. And immediately my wife goes, is Anya afraid of Jimmy? And I'm like,
Ooh, nice.
no. Like,
Awesome.
you're not supposed to know that. No.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
you did a great job with Anya.
Oh,
I just wanted to chime in quickly that there's two things. I was just pulling some stuff up while Johanna was answering those questions. First of all, I actually have the entire like first pitch slideshow.
no
Like
way.
then the game was shown off, or at least like something from very soon after that, including like a breakdown of like all the plot points as it was
No
seen
way.
in like 3 weeks into development or whatever.
Are-
So like I don't know if that's like if this is like a good format to like show that.
Are
but
you
that's
okay?
so-
Are you okay with sharing that?
I looked through it. There doesn't seem to be any like materials that would be like fucked up about it. So, is everyone else chill with that?
Yeah, I haven't looked at it for a long time, but if you think it's fine. I mean, I know there's a
Absolutely.
lot of stuff that
for it.
we edited afterwards.
Oh
'cause
yeah,
I
yeah. I
think
mean, it's
I was-
definitely changed a lot.
yeah, it's not the original one, but yeah, it's yeah, close.
Yeah,
The closest thing. It's yeah.
it's still called Space Twin Peaks. Like it doesn't even have mouthwashing yet, so it's definitely pretty early.
I think it's the mouthwashing because it was always called that was my pitch for the title of the game even during the first pitch. And I think I was nervous about like leading with it because I thought people would be like, nah, like immediately we can't call it
Yeah.
mouthwashing. So I think it's the subtitle in one of the slides. But I was like, and then one of the other guys was like, oh, I think that's a fun working title. And I was kind of like, oh, cool, can we make it the actual title? I think it's fun. You guys were on board immediately, so yeah, shouldn't be worried.
Yeah. Oh no, continue.
I was just gonna say, so like the mouthwash, obviously, there was an interview I read, I think you guys did with Game Informer recently, where someone was asking about Carcass CLAD, and you're like, well, it's not just called mouthwashing because there's mouthwash. But there is actually mouthwash. So in your original plan, was it always going to be mouthwash in the cargo hold?
Yeah, it was always gonna be the first idea was mouthwash and hence the name. And then after sitting with it for a while, I was thinking like, is there any other thing that would be, more interesting somehow, just to have various it was always gonna be alcohol. That was the thing. But I was like, okay, is it somehow gonna be more beneficial to have it just be hard liquor or sanitizer was one, but I was immediately like, oh, they're gonna think it's a COVID commentary if you make hand sanitizer and stuff like that. So, and then yeah, it's mouthwashing is just I think mouthwash it's inherently almost funny in a kind of sad and horrible way, and then you can make like a fun looking bottle for it were kind of the thing. So I was like, yeah, it's got to be mouthwash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, it's just such kind of like you said, there's an irony to like, oh, we're saved, we can get to the cargo, and it's completely useless. Like, can't
Yeah.
use it as an antiseptic. You can kind of use it to get drunk. It's gonna make you really sick. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of I mean, that was kind of a big part of how Fish is made as well, is that I really enjoy, like, a juxtaposition or in a scene where something is funny, but it's also horrific. So
Yeah.
it is funny that it's mouthwash, but it's also just absolutely horrible. So I hope to kinda hit a lot of things like
It's
that
it's
in something like
very
mouthwash.
like to me tonally, it's very similar to the ending of the Mist movie, where like
Mm,
um it's like, oh,
exactly.
the monsters are coming. We have to wipe ourselves out. What a tragic moment. And then you can almost hear like the womp womp, like as the door opens and the military pulls up. Like it's so tragic, but from like a top down perspective, it's ironic that, that
Yeah,
would happen.
and that's also then, like, another way that we were able to incorporate, like, a sort of twist in the tonal shift. Because when you first go into the game, like, ideally, you would have no idea what it's about, then you go, "Oh, okay, it is kinda this horrible, funny mouthwash thing with this guy who's, like, completely skinless and, like, super extreme looking and stuff." But then it does the tonal shift in something that's very real and very, like, serious in a sense. So that's another way that I was sort of trying to build it up to be one thing, to be like, okay, now we're doing a twist in
Yeah.
that sense.
Well, I feel like you guys did a really good job at blending those two elements because beginning of the game, it's like, all right, horror, like you said, you see Curly and stuff like that. You expect it. Like I was waiting for the monster to pop out any minute, which again, look, Jimmy, yeah. But I was waiting for the shoe to drop, and then like you find the mouthwashing and you find the TV down there playing the commercial, and watching the commercial is almost like you're getting laughed at as the player. It's like, haha, you thought this was something, blah blah blah. So then you expect like kind of the absurd elements to kick up, and they do, but then they start to coincide with like the more serious elements that start to dig in. And I feel like it's best surmised at the end when you're talking to not Anya's child in the form of Polly the pony. And it's like the physical setting is ridiculous, right? On top of a pile of mouthwash,
Yeah.
there's a plastic horse with the speaker that you're talking to. But the conversation that's happening there is so brutal. But there's never a moment where one of those details overrides the other. Like it's absurdist, but it's also heavy. And one of those doesn't sacrifice, which is a very good like balance that I think you all hit, especially with like the last act of the game.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was another fear when writing it, is like, okay, how do I make this how do you make the balance hit? Because if you go too far in either direction, I think it could be distasteful or in some manner just, like, not interesting or some preachy maybe. Um, so it's nice to hear that, people have appreciated it, I guess.
No, I think it's I because even while playing it, there were moments that make me not really giggle, but kind of like like, isn't this goofy? And then, but you're so uncomfortable by like the information you're learning and stuff like that. Um, Especially when it's set in, it sets in like what Jimmy did to Anya. Because I think, if I remember it, the first time I played the game, I realized what had happened to her during the screen scene when she's asking, why is it there locks on the doors and stuff like that. But again, in my head, I'm like, oh, I bet Curly did something. But then as like you get to the end and you realize it's yourself and you start to recontextualize stuff, that was so overwhelming that the absurdity, it was almost like you, the devs, were like, hey, turn that frown upside down. What's the matter? Feel sad? In a good way. In a good way. It was a very unique experience throughout the game. I don't mean to just spend the interview gassing up the game, but nice.
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment on that absurdism thing actually, because we I think one thing that's easy to be lost, like now that the game's actually out and it's like hit with people so much, is that like when we were working on it, it was really hard to tell how much like the story would have that emotional impact, and also a lot of the Anya elements of the story were much less emphasized in earlier versions of the script, and I think that's something the script had to really like grow into over the course of for like some of those characters. So like I think when we were just because for a long time we just had like sticky notes. This is everything that happens in the game from like really early, and and it seemed so goofy, like so much more that it like you as you describe it, it starts to kind of like bring some of that back. But like it's really just like a story where at every stage, like it's like it's almost like kind of like a sick joke. Like what's the worst possible thing that could happen to these characters at every possible turn where there was like a left or a right. And it seemed like it would almost like lean more, at least to me personally, like when I was first reading the script, it felt more like dark humor. Like it would be like I don't think like back then I could have said decisively that people would finish Mouthwashing with it being like impactful in the way that it was. Like, and it might not just be more like, wow, it's like comical how kind of like it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Um, and it's really weird how it like grew into that as time went on. But there were always like, for example, like Swansea's monologue was like, I don't know when it was written at first, but it was like planned from like the very start. Like that was like a beat that was like always there. It was one of the only pieces of dialogue that we knew exactly what it would be from like almost the start of the production.
There was there's like people commenting on the video who had like struggled with addiction, and they were like, I've never seen like a character that so encompasses the things I fight with as much as Swansea does in that final monologue, talking about how like some maybe that was, you know, that maybe it's hard to admit, but maybe I do like the way I was back when I had a problem, kind of thing. And it's such an honest moment from a game that is so set up with like liars and fakes and stuff like that. Like, there's so many points in the game where you think you know what's happening and then it turns, and then you have the guy who, at least for me, was a potential antagonist throughout the entire game, be so honest about his own situation that it's kind of it kind of wakes you up. It's sobering almost from all the, especially at that moment in the game where you're having these visions and you just got out of the vent segment and stuff like that. Um, it's one of the moments I think about in the game the most. I remember playing it for the first time, and at the beginning, learning Curly was the captain. I'd made some comment to myself like, "Oh, well, you know, the captain goes down with the ship," which is ironic because he's the only one that does not go down with the ship. Um,
Yeah.
I someone phrased, again, I'm going to the comments. Someone in the comments said Curly is forced to commit to his inaction, which I think is a great way to put it, because kind of a question to you guys. To me, I almost view Jimmy as the, you know, the monster of the story. Like he is the bad thing in the closet. He's what turns all this around. And because he's the monster, I almost view Curly as the human who could have done something but didn't, right? It's like Jimmy was always evil, but like there's not a lot you can do for that guy. But Curly, I feel like, was the person who did the wrong. If this was Jurassic Park, he's the lawyer who doesn't care about the safety rules and stuff like that, right? Um, how do you guys view Curly in the narrative? Do you feel that he's culpable? Do you feel like he was just a friend who kind of made an accident, didn't look at some things? Like, how evil do you view him, basically?
I like we get that question a lot, of course. I like being a little bit like, you know, the text is the text. And I think that that moment is partially good because you kind of have to put yourself into it in a little bit. Like if I was in if like why if kind of like why is he doing it? If I was in this situation and acting like this, why would I be behaving like that? And I think there you can read into it in different ways, what he is thinking in that moment. And I think from how it was written in the original script and how maybe I intended it is maybe a little bit different how it read when it was animated, because you know obviously it's I'm describing what Curly is maybe thinking and feeling in the script, and then it goes through the animations and whatnot. I think the tone is a little bit different. And then seeing some reactions to it and some of the people kind of tearing, like picking apart the scene afterwards, I think there's even aspects of it that I'm like, oh well, I didn't even consider that. So I do enjoy it being a moment of the game where I don't want to tell people what I exactly think about it. I know that's such an annoying
No,
writer answer, but
I
yeah,
completely respect the, you know, I wrote the piece speaks for itself. To the two guys that didn't write the piece, what do you think, Curly?
Yeah, and honestly, like, this is what you had to tell us as well, like, a concerning amount of the time. I think it's something we've had to work on a little bit as we I think there was, like,
Yeah.
I don't think you had ever, like, told me what How Fishes Made means, for example. Like, anyway, when I've asked what's the script, she's like, "Just read it." And it's like, "Bro,
Yeah, I tried.
I gotta have the the, but, no, sorry, so we're talking, like, the like, Curly and Jimmy moment
Yeah,
when they're,
kind of like how do you personally view Curly? Do you view him as like an honest guy that made some mistakes, or do you think of him as a villain?
I think, like, everyone in Mousewashing's supposed to be like, I don't think there's, like I I think the hope with Mousewashing is that nobody comes out as, like, completely clear cut evil guy, villain, like, and that kinda includes Jimmy too, as much as he's, like, obviously pushed to, like, such a ridiculous point by his own actions that, like, it pretty much dehumanizes him. Um, I think, like I think it would be a very not exciting reading of Curly for him just to be like just like an evil guy who like because I think like the way people don't kind of ignore what like are willing to like look past what Curly there's still debate about whether Curly is like a good guy or not in the community pretty actively and I think there was even intention like when we were like working on those scenes I remember like not to speak too much to kind of like Johanna's angle on it but like I think there's this feeling of like even seeing Curly and just being like, wow, he's hot. Like when we first show up, like wow, damn, he's got a good looking, like he looks like a really affable guy. And like so much of like. I think there's just like Curly represents to me like a lot of the kind of like real types of people where like you can meet them and you can like them. It's not like they're a sociopath or there's something like Dahmer shit where they're secretly evil. There's like they are nice people to like 90% of the people in their lives, but they might also be the kind of people who might look past like something unforgivable where if you put them in the wrong circumstance, like something terrible would happen. And that's probably like a lot of people. So it would be tough to describe that as like evil.
I can respect that. What do you say, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, my reading is pretty much the same as that. Like, I think it's a hard thing to admit that like I also did not get it. Just like first time reading the script and just being like, I'm not super sure what it means, but like having talked to Johanna and like having seen what other people have been reading about the game and everything, like I feel like it's definitely what Jeffrey was touching on is that like early he's not evil because that would just be cartoonish, and he's also just kind of not really a good guy. It's like the action of not doing anything is still an action, and does harm. Say that you're presented with two options and one will very clearly like help somebody, one will just lead to a worse outcome. If you do nothing, one of them is going to happen, and like if it is the bad one, then like then you're kind of responsible for that because you did not do anything. And so my reading on it is like it's more nuanced than just calling him the bad guy, but what he did was bad, and so therefore, like I don't know, it's I don't want to be like giving a reading that like feels official because I am part of the development
Sure,
team, but that's that is it's kind of aligns with what Jeffrey was saying before. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I think one thing.
no,
Sorry, I
you
just
no
want to
no,
mention.
you go right ahead.
Yeah, this is something I've kind of only really recently been thinking about, but I've kind of like now that the game's been out so long and there has been such a big like sort of fandom response to it, and you see a lot of discussion on the characters and stuff. I feel like it's very interesting because obviously this is the first time anything like this has happened to any of us, and you know specifically for characters that I've written where so many people are interested in them. But it's my mindset on the characters was so different while I was writing it, while I just while they were just in my head. Now that it's I maybe almost even find it a bit difficult to kind of put into words what I mean, but like they've gone through this like flanderization process, I feel like, in my head as well. And it kind of makes me think like, is this sort of why, for example, maybe like TV writers have a much more difficult time writing characters the further they go into a story because they constantly have this feedback. And even though at least I personally kind of like, I do like seeing the discussions and everything. But ideally, I'd like to think of myself as someone who can like step away and then just go back to like the original mindset of what my intentions were and what the core of the characters were. But I do find that it's increasingly difficult. I think probably in part because it is such a short story in the end. So you keep seeing a lot of like opinions reiterated over and over again, and you kind of forget where your intention ended and where the sort of like just popular opinion started. Um, so yeah, that's been very interesting. Like we're not working on any kind of mouthwashing 2 or anything, but if I had to write these characters more, I'm kind of like, how would I get myself back into this like objective mindset on them? And it's especially with Jimmy, because he is the like almost meme character of like, oh, we can't show his face. Oh, he's so bad, and like he's a bad character, obviously. But you can't sit down with that attitude when you start writing a character like him. I think sometimes I've seen some people struggle with me saying this, that you have to get into their mindset. You have to see it from their point of view. You have to find sort of like horrible parts about yourself. At least for me, it's all of the characters draw from emotions I've had or like moments where I've thought like, oh, I'm not that person. I always have to say I haven't done anything like Jimmy or any one of them has,
Right.
but they're all coming from this like same sort of like emotional source. So you have to kind of examine them honestly, I feel like. And that can be difficult if you have this like popular opinion sentiment in your head that you can't discuss a character a certain way, or you don't want to sort of look at parts of them that are not fun to talk about. If that makes any sense.
No, I think it definitely does. I feel like for me, one of the things that works so well with kind of how you interpret the characters, like outside of the fandom and stuff, just by playing the game, is the fact that Curly does not speak, while he's tied up. There's the laugh, and then there is like Jimmy's visions or like his like dreams, which may or may not be real of Curly talking to him and stuff like that. So because of that, Curly is completely silent for all the events that unfold. And by the end of the game, you realize that he's aware of everything that's happened. He knows about Jimmy. He knows that he didn't cause the crash of the ship, but he just lays there in silence. And because of that, for me at least, I felt that I was able to project a lot of ill will on him, um, especially because in narratives like this, where it's about a disaster, you want to blame someone, right? Uh, and again, I'd kind of like in my mind compartmentalized Jimmy as a monster. So, which again, more nuanced than that, I understand. But in my head, I'm like, yeah, this guy, I'm playing as the villain or whatever. So Curly could have stopped him. Curly could have done something. And I felt like in my head, I was certainly more towards the idea, not in the writing, but in my interpretation that Curly was the villain, until, funny enough, I played the DLC for How Fish is Made, and that is the only time that you hear Curly post crash, right? He says something, and the way he describes it, where he's like, "Oh, I'm the one who convinced Jimmy to come on board. I'm the one who got him on." It was like the first relatable moment that I think kind of humanized Curly a lot to me. Because like I was thinking of instances in my life, obviously not to the same degree, but maybe there's a friend who you convince to come out to be around and stuff, and as they start to kind of like fall apart, or they mess up a job or a friendship or something like that, there's kind of this snowball happening that you just want to ignore for a little bit. This is like that amped up to 10. And it's almost like a little part of me wanted to feel sympathetic for the position Curly was in, especially because it's the first time he shows sympathy for what happened. Like he seems remorseful of Jimmy kind of turning things around. And that kind of redirected me to being like, well, he messed up, but I don't know if that, writes him off entirely. Now, the narrative certainly, I believe, punishes him for it because, he's the only guy that doesn't go down with the ship, and he watches everyone else go down before him. Um, but that's kind of a typical thing within horror narratives and stuff, like small inactions or small bad decisions lead to like these great consequences, stuff like that. Um, So I can certainly respect that. But yeah, it's crazy how much the How Fishes Made DLC kind of reinterpreted my understanding of Curly. And if I'm right, that came out before Mouthwashing, right?
Way
That was like
before.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
most of the story wasn't even written explicitly. Like we didn't have there was not a build of Mousewashing where that had all the dialogue when Last One Then Another released. It's actually pretty crazy how much like it still holds up for how much the story kind of like evolved even after the point that we released that. Because I mean that was like right next to our announcement trailer, I think, which is like
Yeah.
crazy early in dev, like first third of development or something.
It
I
was
think.
it was
Yeah.
made really fast, written really fast. Obviously, there were no new assets, or there were a few new assets we had to make for it.
Yeah.
It was put together in what would I want to say, a couple of weeks. That is like Jeff said, it's a good notion that yeah, it's surprising it actually holds up as well as it does. Because yeah, I have no qualms with it either. Yep, I actually I really thought like about the fact that that is the only time you sort of hear him talking after the crash. 'Cause he obviously talks before the crash a lot. But yeah, I wanted to touch a bit on the like. That's why I think showing Curly's his like pre crash self wasn't in the game for a very long time. Like the majority of the game, I was very adamant. I wanted it to be that we never see Curly as free crash. And that was because it is like it's so much. I think it's a lot easier to view him as like a monster because he looks so like scary and spooky. And I wanted to try and make him. He doesn't really look like he's like comically. He doesn't have skin. Nobody would in real life survive anywhere near the amount of damage he's taken. But that was a little bit on purpose to like. I didn't want him to look like too much of any kind of real person who's had like disfigurements because I wanted it to be like comical because that would later then I think it would make it kind of I thought it was interesting to make it more difficult because this character can't talk, but he is, he's a regular person still, but he just looks so unrelatable at that point to see how people would react to that. I think in one way it would have been interesting never to show him pre-crash, but I think that I'm happy now that we did put the pre-crashes there. We got the contrast again. That's why he is so like handsome when in pre-crash form because I wanted the Whiplash to be really strong. Like that would be the guy that you have on a poster for an airline to be like, "I'm your captain," stuff like that.
Well, I mean, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Don't make
I was supposed to say, no, just like the tiny tidbit. There was a little bit in the middle as well. We were saying that never showing him in the game, but having him be the cover of the game, like having like the having like a drawing of what he looked like before, like kind of silhouetted a bit, but still like him
Yeah.
as like the main cover of Mouse Watching. That'd be the only context you ever get for what he looks like, and you wouldn't even know it's him originally, of course. But that was just a fun kind of in the middle thing.
That's interesting. I think it worked for me showing Curly because I totally get there's a lot of stories where it's like just don't show him before this is the audience's only interpretation. Because similar to him not speaking after the crash, it's like, the audience can fill in their mind what that is to them, what he looked like before. But for me, showing him worked really well because especially at that moment in the game, because that is like seconds before you realize, oh, Jimmy was the one who caused the crash. Like in your mind, Curly's built up to be such a monster. And then you see his face and it's like, oh, he's a handsome guy. And then like there's of
Yeah.
course the scene with like him and like Jimmy getting close and the screen's flashing like kills 99% of germs and you're like, oh, and I think that moment worked really well. So I think in my humble opinion, I think you certainly made the right call showing him near the end like that. I think that worked well. And it's just wild, like even my experience with it, like I said, playing the game, having all these notions, and then like figuring out everything else about the game for the video and going back and playing the How Fishes Made DLC and that recontextualizing a lot of my opinions on Curly. So like my third or fourth playthrough of the game felt different than the one before and stuff. I just really appreciate, especially considering how tight the timeline is for a game that plays with so many different ideas. Like the literal runtime of the game. I think it's impressive how much you guys managed to get out of all of that. Because I mean, on the surface, it's 5 characters in space, right? But I feel like each one of them are so fleshed out. Even Daisuke, who, from a top down is like, oh, he's the kid who gets hurt to show the other characters their wrongdoing. But it's like even when you find him drunk and he's talking about how like his how his family will think of him and stuff like that. There was no one who was just used as cannon fodder. And I really
Yeah, that actually, that conversation specifically, I think Daisuke is the character that I'm kind of like, with him there obviously there's regrets all over the place in the writing and in general with the game that you can endlessly pick apart. I'm sure for any game. I think that conversation with Daisuke, it was longer. I think vast majority of the writing process for Mousewatching was that it was like overwritten at first. It had to come down, like it just needed it for because you don't have voice acting, and we want to keep the runtime like relatively low. So even though it's a narrative game, the dialogue had to be like pretty like snappy. So I think that was a big conversation with Daisuke that I cut down when he is drunk, in favor of time. And my thinking at the time was that we spend so much time with him making the cocktail. So you are talking with Daisuke, but you're not talking about Daisuke, which I regret. And I wish I would have left that conversation a bit longer, where he mentions his parents and stuff. Because I think out of all the characters, I definitely think he got kind of the short end of the stick in terms of characterization. Yeah.
I don't think I understand what you mean, because out of them, I feel like he's definitely you spend the least time about him, like you said. But I feel like that is okay from my perspective, at least, because he feels like the only character who was truly had an innocence about them. Like obviously Anya was innocent, like she didn't deserve anything that happened to her, but there was never a moment with Anya where I felt like she was almost infantilized, I never felt like, oh, this is just like a poor little thing that the world's happening to. She felt like someone who she had found an inner peace almost with like where her character was going and stuff like that, which leads to like her last conversation with Swansea and obviously her taking the life in the med bay. It like I make the point in the video that this obviously doesn't apply to real life, but in the specific setting of Mouthwash, she got to make a decision for herself for once. And there's a lot of she had a willpower to her that in my mind I didn't ascribe to Daisuke. To me, Daisuke was the one who just wasn't prepared for what was happening. Didn't see a lot of this coming. Like they're both victims, but in my mind I almost placed more of an innocence on him. So because of that, the only details we get of him being like he's still thinking about mom and dad, he's so optimistic in the face of all this horrible stuff that's happening. I feel like that works, especially since, if I recall right, yeah, he's the first one to die that you see die. You see him dying because it turns out Anya had before, but you don't know that till later. So it makes sense that the one who was the least prepared for kind of like the harsh reality is the one that gets hit with it first. So I feel like that worked. I also want to say, whose idea was it when you first go to the med bay after Anya took her own life to just have her be like a blur on the ground? Because that was so haunting the first time playing through the game. Whose idea was that?
I was the data mosh guy, or I do all the shaders, so like that was and like a lot of the chapter structuring, so that one would have been me. But it was really like as simple as we were just like we have this chapter plan where it's like we want medical should be unlocked canonically, because I think that whole chapter with Daisuke was originally supposed to be, from my memory, a lot of like the big changes to the script gameplay wise happened around the poisoning Swansea Daisuke event arc. That was like because that was really kind of, that had to be changed a lot. And there was also a period in development where we added a lot more gameplay sequences around. Like in original Mousewashing script, the only time the game did anything like supernatural, quote unquote, was like the very end. There was like nothing until that. All of that was added later. But anyway, so we added the scene, because that's the same scene where when you walk around and you see that blur where you're going to go to the horse monster. after. And yeah, so anyway, we originally it was just going to be like Daisuke says something, it's all a cutscene, we never have to worry about where the player goes. It's fine. And then we add this gameplay segment, and now we're like, okay, well, we don't really want to like arbitrarily stop the player from entering medical. We want Swansea to be in medical and to tell you to go somewhere else, because you tell the player to get medicine, they're obviously going to go to medical. So we had to like have a way of shooing the player out. So now we're like, oh shit, though, like Anya's corpse is here. That's like, and we don't want to, that reveal supposed to be for later in the game. Like, what do we do about that? But I mean, it worked pretty well with the psychology of the characters and stuff to just, have some way of kind of masking it. And we've been using the same effect we used for that, we were using for the chapter transitions, where we do like the crazy moshing effect on the screen. So we just decided to like localize it around it. But like the second we started putting in, we were like, this is banger. Like this needs to. We were trying to think of some other places to put in the game, but it ended up being right for just kind of that moment, because it is like probably one of the coolest like visual effects in the whole game.
Yeah, to be honest, that was probably the scariest moment in the game. Like, obviously, the first time I don't understand how the under cargo segment works and the giant horse thing kills me. That was alarming. But I feel like the most dreadful moment in the game was walking into medical and just seeing a blur. It's almost because at that point there were the visions and the hours till judgment, and I realized that Jimmy's like his perspective. I didn't think that he was the one responsible, but I'm like, he's an unreliable narrator at the least. So I get to that point, and it's almost like Jimmy isn't going to process what's happening over here. He's just pretending like it doesn't exist. So my stomach dropped. I feel like that's such an effective moment. And it's also just like, I feel like on paper, it's such a simple solution. It's like, oh, we'll just blur out the whole thing over there. But gosh, it's so impactful, especially because it doesn't happen anywhere else in the game. It's like that's, and it also works for like the final moments of the game where you kind of realize Jimmy cannot come to terms with what he did to Anya. Anya's body is literally just something he's not going to process. It's just a smear of pixels on that side, which I think is so, gosh, it's so sickening.
I think I'm allowed to say we had to be very strict later in development, because obviously there's like a whole team putting in art assets and especially coming up with like imagery to show in that final kind of what we call like the Bizarro sequence, the end of the game when everything's going crazy, and we had to be like, it took a lot of discipline to make sure it's like, because it's like everyone's like Anya is like, obviously the point of a lot of things, but it's like never show Anya like after the point where you see her corpse. Like it was like every time there was like something like just a model, if we put the ID cards on the walls and like you can see Anya in like testing or whatever, it's like get that shit out of there. Like you never see Anya.
Can you still see like corners of her hair on some of the ID cards? I think you can. Yeah.
That's
that was
the
your
one
idea, right,
thing.
Martin?
Yeah, exactly. That whole sequence, like the whole idea is that, like, it's the one time I broke that rule, is that like she is there, but like there's always another card.
Yeah.
You can look up who is covering her ID card. So she technically is the one time that you can see her, like the caricature of her somewhere in Bizarro. But yes, she's covered.
The first time I played through, I just played through the game, but then the second time I was looking for everything. So during that segment, I'm like, oh, Anya's not here. And then I just saw like a tuft of hair. And it's like even more like, oh man, it's like she is, he just can't, he won't see her. He won't acknowledge. It's, gosh, man, there's so many cool moments in the game. But yeah, that totally makes sense. It's like after the tragedy, like even her, what is supposed to be her segment isn't even her segment. It's the child.
Mhm.
It's the giant uterus horse thing hanging in the ceiling that the centipede comes out of. Man, there's just so many elements that are played so well, and I love again. This is just me gassing up the game, but I love at the end how like Jimmy's final confrontation is not with her, but it's with a horse who he has like weirdly disembodied as the child of her and stuff like that. Like, man, I get, man, like I said, these aren't even questions. I'm just ranting at this point. Were there any other rules like that, like what you just mentioned, Martin, where it's like, okay, after we get to the end, don't show Anya? Was there any other points like that in development where for a narrative or like visual purpose you could or couldn't do something?
I think at least one that I can think of right off the bat is that we never wanted to see outside in space, and we never wanted to show like even a sort of like outline of what the ship might look like from the outside because we really wanted to or have windows anywhere or anything like that. And that was just because like we really wanted to get that like claustrophobic feeling right from the get. Of course, it's obviously great for us because we don't have to design it or like model anything as well. But and then I think the window kind of came from that idea that that they don't have actual windows, they only have this fake window. So that one was one really strong one, I think, like right from the get go as well. But I'm trying to think if there's other stuff.
Yeah,
I think
I'm trying to
yeah,
think as
go ahead.
well, like if there's any. 'Cause I'm sure there were quite a lot of things we were trying to be pretty like universal about with the game. But it's hard to say.
Yeah.
There was actually one scene. I know we've discussed this a couple times, Johanna, and I don't know if either of us remember exactly what it was, but I swear to God there was a scene where you saw space. They had like a big space
Yeah.
mytho at some point in
No,
the
we've
script, and then it went away.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that memory too. My memory of it is, and I like it's been so long that I don't like remember. I think they had some kind of like room that was supposed to be kind of like a big window that was mimicking space or something like that. That's how I remember it, but it could also be that they maybe had like one big bay where you would see outside. Um, but I think that was a very like quick was brought up, and then we thought, no, we don't want to make it, and we don't. It kind of clashes with the claustrophobia idea.
Dare
The
I
whole
say, was
thing.
that the original place for the Anya nighttime scene? It
Yeah,
has to be.
yeah, that's
Mm.
absolutely
Okay,
where
'cause
that
yeah,
was
it's
supposed
just
to
I know
be.
there's gonna be one extra room you only saw one time in the game.
I feel like there was
Yeah.
I know there was a trailer shot of Anya sitting in front of the screen, and I can't remember what the line was, but she says a line that didn't show up in the game, I think. Um, I feel like that was in front of a star screen, but it also may have just been like a starry night sky.
Oh yeah, in one of the trailers, she says,
Yeah.
what's my part in all this?"
Yes, yeah,
And
that's it.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that one. I think that was specifically written maybe for the trailer. I don't remember because it's very much referencing kind of like what's her part in all this. I don't think there was like an actual like natural place to put that line because the only sort of differences that exist was the demo dialogue is a little bit different, partly because some of the text was just kind of cleaned up, but there's a conversation with between Jimmy and Anya that occurred in the demo that not occur anymore in the main game. Just because I wanted to end it on like a very spiky moment, so it's a little bit different.
It's also a
And then some of
cliffhanger. It's so unfathomably based to end a demo with half a conversation and then not finish it in the main game at all. Because I don't
Yeah,
think
that's
we,
how
I
it
don't
was
know if we
written. Yeah, there was no like further in that conversation. It was just written to end there and be like boom, and that's it. I mean, yeah, and then yes, and then a lot of some of the early trailers have some like really early trailers where the UI and everything looks completely different. Like there's a scene where Swansea is kind of berating Curly for a little bit, like post crash Curly, stuff like that. Sort of like lost in the shuffle or just didn't fit in anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, there's like I know like you just said there originally Daisuke was more and stuff like that, then you cut it for sake of time and things like that. It's always interesting to me in like development what stuff stays in, what stuff comes out. Um, I think the idea to never show space was a good idea because there's parts in the game, especially as it gets more surreal near the end, where you're like, are they even in space? Is this a submarine? Is this all a simulation? I don't know. I can't trust anyone now. So never seeing outside kind of adds to the hysteria, I think, as you're going through it. Because I mean, there's so many
that's
parts of it where you could be in a submarine or something. You have no idea. Like,
It's actually really intentional. Like that was weirdly like it didn't. I'm actually surprised you mention it because it doesn't really like, in my opinion, come through that much in the final game. But like original pitches for Mouse Rushing focused actually quite a bit on the idea that the player like one of the kind of almost red herrings is that the player would expect that them being in space is a lie. That we're gonna like pull the rug out and twist that it's not gonna be like that was. I think we've talked about quite a few times, especially earlier in development.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that tracks. I think just the claustrophobia of everything kind of lends your mind towards that. Especially, like I said, the last third act is like just everything you thought you understood about Curly and Jimmy and stuff getting unraveled. So you're like, why not? Maybe I'm not in space. Maybe this is all a lie. Who cares? It doesn't matter anymore. So
It's a birthday party. Whatever.
yeah, whatever.
See cake.
Sure, whatever.
Who cares anymore?
Whatever you want to do. I also think it's effective how much like different dialogue is so recontextualized on the second playthrough, which is obvious given the nature of any story with a twist. But like the scene at the birthday party where Jimmy's kind of yelling back, kind of accusing Curly of, wanting this to happen and stuff like that. But there's also like his minimizing of Anya in that instance and stuff like that too, which on the first playthrough, you're like, well, he's stressed out. He may not mean it. On the second playthrough, you're like, oh, which is similar to a lot of stuff in the game where you just kind of feel the weight of it on the second time through. Did you intend for that with the writing that like you kind of left almost landmines that would make sense on the second playthrough, or was that just kind of natural with the version of the story?
No, that was really intentional, and I mean, like, that was another, like, kind of very scary, I think, part of writing Mouthwashing is that, like, you need to sideline Anya, um, for the story to work, but, obviously, if someone goes in and they're kinda not, like, paying attention too much or they don't wanna think about it too much, they're just kinda like, "Oh, well, this story sucks." They're just, like, pushing the woman out of the story or the only female character is so weak, that's kinda lame. It's like, yeah, that's the point. That is the point of the story. It's like in her absence and in being pushed aside, she becomes the focus of the story. Uh, and then obviously, like she is the inciting incident and everything. But yeah, I mean, it. My fear was that I would like execute it. The idea was there, but I would execute it badly, and it just wouldn't like work out. Yeah, a lot of mouthwashing was very like intentionally, obviously, like lands are like referencing things that the player doesn't know. Um, One that I very rarely see picked up on, which I find a little bit surprising, is that Jimmy's first line of dialogue in the game is "anyone else would do the same thing," and
Mm.
I'm kind of like, it's to me, it's so like it hits you over the
Ah,
head with it. The minute you cut away from the sequence with Polly, he says anyone else would have done the same thing.
hmm.
But like it just doesn't read really like in the context of where you're at. I mean, there's stuff like that that I was just very intentionally trying to put in, and like obviously not all of them are gonna work, and there's definitely stuff like we've discussed that I'm kind of like, oh, I could have done that differently or whatever. But in the end, I think it came about surprisingly well, especially like when you're in the middle of writing a story like this, and especially when you really have to sit down, Jeff mentioned, like we had a Miro board that we had on a big screen that we would just look at it and we would move around stuff so that everything makes logical sense and it makes sense on a motivation level for all the characters and like making sure that all of that lined up was like surprisingly a bit of a headache at times. So then once you go through that, then coming back to like, okay, well now it makes logical sense, but is it actually just any fun to read anymore? I think the like Daisuke going into the events sequence was one of those like like it was I find it a little bit like you really have to like kind of like put the characters there and give them a reason to go and put the rooms on a specific sort of like distance from each other to make it work. That it was like it felt very clunky while it was happening. I think it reads fine in the game in the end, but yeah, and then being like, okay, is this just too clunky now at this point where it's not going to be interesting anymore? So it was really difficult to keep on top of that. At least for me, I've never kind of written anything like this before.
Yeah, it's the same, but the whole Swansea Daisuke thing, just the logistics of that were like a lot of like, it was just really tough. Like, there's still some awkwardness and like Swansea runs at you with an axe. You're in medical room. You have a gun. There's one way out, and then somehow you're in the cockpit, and he's like breaking down the glass in the cockpit. And like a lot of that, like the logistics of that whole thing were something like, and everything around that section of the game we talked about a lot. I posted in chat just because I have one of the early like sticky note drafts that Johanna's talking about of like, this is
So-
what mouse washing was to us for so long.
Whoa. Man, that's
of just
crazy.
like
Definitely color coded.
Yeah, so they're color coded
Whoa.
specifically by, because one of the things like we were thinking about the timeline switching the whole time we were planning the game, and we had a rule that like we would never do a cut between two. Oh, you were asking about rules earlier. Here's a great rule. We never ever will cut between the same timeline twice. It always has to be like, so we have like the game divided into pre-crash, post-crash, post-crash, or like post-Anya deaths, or Daisuke in the vent, and then we have like what we call bizarro scenes, and like those are like, and so we have like a different sticky note color for each of those, and we had to like always be cutting around between them, and it actually makes it like really annoying to write, to be like, to try and like find out how to move things, because every time we move like two post crashes next to each other and we're like, fuck, we need a new scene, or like to go and add like something in between.
Yeah.
And then also like making the times advance in a way you don't think about it much, but like every like, because we always use the same unit of time for each one, so like all post crash seeds say how many months they are, so like we kind of need to like make sure the story like separates by months, and that the before crash like works as days, and the other one works as hours and stuff. It was like a lot of like weird stuff like that to think about.
Yeah, a lot of small stuff, and that's like another one, because I added the gun into the story, and that created like a whole nightmare of like, okay, well now Jimmy has to have the gun in his inventory, but we want to save it for a certain point where you reveal the gun from the case, which is why that's the other place where we use like kind of a, not the same blurring effect, but like a censored version. So you have, if you look at your inventory when you're in the room when Swansea's gonna charge at you, you have the gun, it's like covered up.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that.
So I think I like have this memory in my mind of like Ryan working on that scene or whatever, and then being like, nobody has the gun, and like I don't want him to have the gun, and like what are we gonna do? And I think those were kind of places where we were just like, we're gonna use like a different way rather than just change the story. But I think those ended up, both the gun like covering and blurring Anya's corpse, I think both ended up working really well. But that was just kind of like coming up on a problem and having to solve it somehow. There's a lot.
This timeline is so funny. Some of it, like Swansea is hunting you, JFC, crazy.
Yeah, very serious. No.
Or like Rutro starting one of them. Another one says it's still depressing.jpg.
This is like, but this is why it's like, I was saying earlier, it's almost impossible to like, it's really hard to look at from the outset, or even for us in hindsight. But like when we were sitting down and this was the entire game does, it was so hard to like take it, was to like understand the emotional weight it's gonna have for players when everything's done and all the pieces they're put in. And I think that's like, like the biggest like lesson learned after making a game like this, I think for probably all of us, but at least like me, is that it is like, you never know what the game's gonna be like at all until it's like with a horror game or something like this. It's like, if you're missing the exact writing of the scene, the sound, or the visual assets being like super polished and all the shader effects and stuff, if any one of those things is gone, the game sucks. Like there's nothing. Like you get like, it's not just like that you're like, oh, once we add the sound, it'll be good. It's like you're playing it and you're like, this is no emotional weight. Like you can't just take the music out of a game like Mouthwashing and have it still like feel the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of the dialogue especially came in, like the final writing came in really late. So like we spent so long like playing these fucking builds of the game where it's just like we'd have the entire game playable like start to finish, and every scene sucked. And we were like, nobody's like how is this game ever going to be something anyone wants to play? I don't know if you've seen, but we actually released the DLC, one of the like first builds of the game that was ever like fully playable. And it's like that is like what it was like POV, you're working on mouse washing, and you're like, how do we turn this into like the final result? Is like, it was so hard to imagine that it would ever like turn out as well as it kind of did when we put it together. And like a lot of that bias of that it was like something as lame as what it was for the whole time we were working on it, like kind of never left. Like the moment we launched the game, there was still this like this thinking of like, this is kind of lame. Because every cool part about the story got boring to me during the time I was playing it before it was good. And so it's so hard to have like a real sense. I think like that's probably one of the big reasons the game is such like a fear of like that we're gonna have you read too much, which I think was really healthy. That we like trim the script a lot, but it also is like maybe the justification for why there's so many like gameplay set pieces in the game and why we probably would have cut those down in certain areas. Even though like most of them I think we generally like, they're still like, I think there's a lot of like moments where like we need to like jingle keys in front of the player because we can never have just like a big dialogue scene where it's just someone talking. Like we divided, even on these sticky notes like later, had divided the chapters between like we had it, if this was like a cutscene chapter that was dialogue, it was a gameplay chapter, or it was like a puzzly chapter like making the poison for Swansea. And like those all, when we had to like make sure we were like, okay, we're never gonna put 2 cutscene chapters in a row. We're never gonna make sure we put too many like big dialogue chapters. And it's like there's this constant paranoia of like we can't have the player like reading too much, and we need to make sure we have like key jingle moments every once in a while for the kids in the back who aren't really paying attention. And a lot of that, like in hindsight, now the game's super popular, is like there's moments where you can like watch people play and they're like so into the story, and especially in those like ending horror sequences of the game, the tension almost like deflates for them because they were like so into the story, and then you do just like one too many like things with a monster or something, and then it's out. I think especially like the horse chasing you on the catwalk to me is like the single weakest moment in the game. Like I would change that massively in hindsight.
Interesting. I feel like with the horse chase, I understand what you mean. I feel like it works really good the first time you're there and you don't really understand like the dynamic, but I understand what you mean because every time I play it after, I just like I know how to just cheese it and like walk over to it. So I understand that. Whereas segments later in the game, like the Swansea vision, where you're in the tombstone, like that changes up every time because he comes from different directions and stuff like that. So I get it. I feel like the horse segment does work, especially because that's one of the first hints you kind of get of Jimmy's state of mind. Especially coming right after again he blurred out half of the med bay to not acknowledge Anya. So I think it still works, but I understand you know
We
how you
definitely still want to
kinda
put
just
something.
yeah.
Like, and the
Yeah.
monster itself is really cool.
Oh yeah.
And the gimmick for the chapter supposedly, like, if it, because the gameplay just like doesn't, like, people just like walk and then you hear the horse coming and then you stand still. Like that's pretty much what it ends up being for people. What was supposed to be is that like the boxes in the middle of the arena, and this still is true. You're actually like shaking up and down, and you can see where the monster is actually like positionally. And like, but I don't think players like notice that almost ever, like because we watch like every playthrough of this game that pretty
Yeah.
much anyone's done. I mean, you
The worst
as
is
a developer of something, you watch all the playthroughs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
I think the worst is if they just happen to get through the segment without ever actually seeing the horse monster. That I get really disappointed if that happens because I think that's what actually makes it cool is then like actually seeing it sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely moments in the game that I feel like had we done a second pass on them, they would have like stuck out as equally as like weighty as some of the narrative moments in the game where like there's explicit dialogue that you can read where the gameplay would shine equally as strongly. But I think like it's always easy to look at it while you're making it as like, I would have maybe tweaked something, but like every single one of those gameplay segments they at least try to tell you something about either the character's state of mind or like especially Jimmy because he's the one seeing all these visions, right? So with the horse segment, it's like, it's the horse is like you mentioned earlier, like it's like a stand-in for the undead child, and him walking backwards in the first in the like vents, him walking away from responsibility, that whole segment is just building up towards that visual and that point of like this is what he's doing, like trying to tell you, but with like visual and gameplay. Like each of those segments still try and like have some kind of narrative twist to them, even though they might, we might have tweaked them a little bit to make them shorter or to make them more focused. Like, yeah.
I think it's apparent that it all is all kind of building because again, it's called Judgment Day, right? It's that whole final segment is kind of Jimmy confronting, the sins, paying penance for what he's done and stuff like that. And it builds up all the way to, Anya is the final one. But then, like you said, not only is she never seen, I don't even think her name's ever said during that whole final segment. Like, even at the end when he's talking to Polly and he says, I apologize for what I did to Jimmy or whatever. Polly's like, why are you still so concerned with him? Like, not even saying her or her name or something. It's just the implication of that. I feel like Anya haunts the narrative in a really good way because of that. Like you said, she was patient zero and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of the design, especially in the last act, where she's never mentioned, but you can kind of see her silhouette in the script. I think that works really well. So that I do want to get to Carcass Clad eventually, but to nerd out about mouthwashing a little bit longer. Martin, you said that you did like the sound stuff for the game,
Yep.
right? I think that, I mean, in any game, sound matters, but I feel like here where there's not voice acting, the sound is so much more, front row because of that.
Yeah.
And when I think of the sound design for the game, the first place my mind goes is Swansea's speech, because it's almost like you can hear, it's hypnotic almost. It sounds, especially combined with the visuals, it sounds like it's music mixed with sounds of a city, mixed with like conversational. It's like a whole life being summarized in a few, like a looping beat, which works well with, obviously what Swansea's saying. To me, that's the most standout moment. To you as the sound designer, what moments in the game were you like the most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly like it feels like a cop-out answer, but like, yes, that's by far the one that I'm like the most proud of, because like it's such a like an encompassing part of like, and why I'm so like happy working in a team like this is that you really do have like the creative freedom that most musicians would like dream of in a project where like you are the one doing the sound and you're doing the music. You get to like dictate how certain scenes feel. That really was like the one moment where I'm like, I'm genuinely proud and so happy about how this moment turned out, because it's partly like a display of like what my musical interests are, right? Which from a selfish level is like, okay, well, I listen to a lot of like experimental bands and I get to like show them, but then also like highlight the writing that Johanna has done that I'm also like such a big fan of. It's just kind of like this whole scene of like it's the teamwork, right? That in a team like this where everybody has their hands in kind of everything, that scene is just such an display of everyone's best abilities. Maybe not so much gameplay because it's just talking, but like, that scene is just it's so wonderful. And yeah, being able to tell, I guess, Swansea's like story from like what seems like humble like starts, where it's kind of pretty, it's so soft, right? Inspired by Lorne, I forget what the song was called.
I think it's Acid Rain.
Yes, Acid Rain, exactly. That
Yeah,
was on the
yeah.
mood board. Yeah, so that was like the inspo for, okay, well, this is kind of the vibe we want, right? Something that's somber, it's a little distorted. But then as he keeps like talking about things that are, like Johanna was mentioning earlier, maybe embarrassing to admit that like this is not, the life I'm living now is not the one that I want. The one that the like the darkest moment of my life is kind of what I want to go back to. That's where it really starts going into the more experimental and dark. Um, and I'm kind of trying to play with like in that segment, like how do I make this sound like something you kind of, it sounds wrong, and in like a certain like audio like nerd way. I wanted to like kind of showcase that in the kind of beat that comes in at the very end is like a guitar amplifier. You take the microphone and you do this with it, like you plug it in and you plug it out and it just starts buzzing in a very particular way. I just wanted to do that as like there's a disconnect, right? Which is like kind of what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, I'm also in a ramble mode.
No, hey, that's how I make a living, just rambling for some reason. No, I can. That's so cool. What? So you use the song and stuff. What all other audio elements are in there, like samples you used and stuff.
It's a lot of like, yeah, so it's interesting that like the whole game is like me trying to like, because I'd never worked on a project this big before. So it was like a challenge for me to not just like, because I'm a musician, that's my background. So I've never done sound design before. So this was me just kind of like, okay, well, I'll try it. I'll see what like works. So there's a lot of like, yeah, I'm a little kid with a big toy box, right? So I'm just like playing around with different sounds, and like I remember earlier we were talking about like do you know if the spaceship is actually a spaceship or maybe it's a submarine? Like all the pipes have water in them to kind of enhance that idea that like maybe this isn't actually a spaceship. It is, but that that kind of like misdirect is something that you can kind of hint at. Um, and it's like, yeah, I just kind of went nuts with like, where can I add sound and what can I do to like enhance the moment? Can I do goofy music here? Can I pull back sound and not do like a score? Because like for instance, the one segment that I was kind of adamant, I don't want music here because I don't want to tell you what to feel. Was the moment where Daisuke, like the axe bit, it's to me, it's always more important, like impactful in an ironic sense, that you don't have somebody telling you what to feel when something horrible happens. Because the Hollywood thing would be to have like sad strings or whatever. But what if we just cut all sound and let you sit with the emotion, like of that scene? I think that just lets that emotion kind of brew, and you get to form your own opinions on, could you maybe have stepped in? Was this the right call? All of those thoughts get room. There's breathing room now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think
Mm.
that I can totally see that. I think it's always interesting when you watch a film or a game or something like that, and something's been happening all the way up until this point, and then it quits all of a sudden. It's like, all right,
Mhm.
what is happening there? And I remember when Daisuke dies, and there's also no music during the polyhorse conversation at the end. Because I remember in that which I'm sure echoes are used at other points in the game, but I remember there where it's like you, like it
Yep.
felt so haunting, like how
Yeah.
everything sounded in the space. It
Yeah.
worked so well.
No, thank you. That was one rule also. I just got reminded of it, that like when we're thinking of how to structure different scenes and how to tell apart the different timelines of the story, the the ambience that happens in the ship, just cut all of it and do dead silence except for like player footsteps and like specific sounds in post crash, where you're in like psychological horror space where you're not really sure if this is real or not. We just cut all sounds. And one of the moment that is also like a special like silence moment is, the final like minute long walk where you're carrying Curly towards the cryo chamber. We just cut sound and we start playing rain sounds instead, to kind of like have a moment of silence, for what is going to be the eventual death of Jimmy. So like that minute, we made it specifically. So like I think we timed it even, that like that walk is exactly a minute long if you do it uninterrupted.
Hmm. Interesting. Man, that's so cool. That's such a cool
Yeah.
detail.
I think I want to say also, yeah, Martin did like all the voice acting in the game. So Polly's
Polly.
voice is Martin's voice. I think, and there were a couple of moments that I very clearly remember where I think Martin made, like, obviously made great calls everywhere, but you were the one who decided to have Paulie voice acting the like confrontation where he asks about Anya and stuff, and I think it works really well. I think that's not something I would have come up with, and I think like, because I think I like only heard about it once you had already kind of made a full or like a version of
Mm.
it. If you had just sat down and asked me like, should I have voice acting, I would be like, nah,
Yeah, to
like,
Jeff's credit, there was actually your idea to have him like splice together little like segments and stuff like that to make that the one time you hear somebody talk. No.
yeah. And then oh, there's something else that I wanted to put together, but I mean, like, yeah, it's all of the like Curly's horrifying noises were all Martin as well. So, and then yeah, we have like I think is it every scene has a like a unique trap playing
think we ever
in it
reuse a
as
trap.
well.
Yeah, no, we never reuse a song. That was one of the crazy parts of me, just like uh, being handed a little toy box and being like a child in a candy store. Like, oh, I get to do like
Yeah.
music
Yeah,
everywhere.
and one of
So I
the
did
one of the
music
things
everywhere.
that I like, one of the things I really like personally also appreciated was that I think you wrote the main theme first. Yeah. And then like I think it was sort of a almost one and done, like it was great just off the bat. So then I was able to put it on my writing playlist for mouthwashing. So it's almost kind of funny that a lot of the writing was being done to that soundtrack part of it already. So I think that worked great because I think that set a lot of the mood very well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point overall that like a game like this wouldn't really work unless the whole team kind of inspired each other in different ways where like me being able to write that song which influences Johanna's writing which then influences the music that I write in return is like it's such a cool kind of mishmash of like creative forces from all kind of angles just interplaying and making this thing together. But like yeah, it's it's just such a unique kind of situation to be in where everybody is each other's like cheerleader.
Yeah, when we have and obviously we were such a small team that like not to mention that Martin, even though like you're really only credited as the musician and like composer and audio guy, you made a lot of the models. You did the mouthwash like logo and stuff like that. So like, because I think it was like you were at one point having to wait for a lot of my writing
Yeah.
before you could do music. So then we had you do some 3D models. Then we got in our environment artist, Yasmin, and then she like the story I always tell is that like I had this like I don't do good like concept art. I just do like a shitty sketch because that's kind of what we have time for. And I'm like I'll get the idea out. So it's this horrible like MS Paint drawing of the cryopod. And we hand it to her on her first day and are like, "Can you make that?" And I can't imagine me coming
I, ha-
into that
I have the
situation.
concept.
Yeah,
art.
you have it.
I have
Yeah,
the,
it's
I
so
upload
bad.
it.
Well, I
this
have to
was
see it.
the first concept that she's given about.
Yeah. Imagine this is your first game dev job, and you're like, "Oh, this is one of our hero assets," and yeah, there's the concept art. Could you make that? Thank you.
Oh
Like,
man.
and she did so great with, and then there's a lot of stuff like
Wow.
that because I'm not a trade like I'm a decent artist, but I'm not a concept artist. So a lot of the stuff for mouthwashing, like there is no concept art, or it was just sketches like that because that's the speed we had to work at. So then yeah, people coming in and like for instance, we had a level designer who came in, but then once he was done with that, he was doing animations, and it was just a matter of like, we don't have anyone to do animations. We're done with level design. Can you do animations now? Like that's how you have to work in a small team like that. But it's really impressive to see people come together like that and like just kind of get what needs to get done.
Hmm. I think it's kind of a testament by how everything turned out that everyone kind of complemented each other. Like, music complement game design complemented story complemented music, and it all is a very cohesive product in the end. And I think it's kind of a testament to all the different departments just being so in touch and like kind of understanding the assignment, with what kind of story you're telling. Um well, I mean, that's a ton of questions about mouthwashing, and I could probably talk about it forever. But I am semi-respectful of your all's time. But yeah, it's just such an impactful game. There's not a ton of games that I've played in recent memory that I find myself just kind of thinking about so long after I get done playing it, and I still think about a lot of the themes from the game. I think about Anya a lot. I think about kind of even my personal feelings about Curly and like how culpable I find him and stuff like that. Like, so I think that's a testament to how good of a job you guys did. So I love the game, and it's certainly one that I'm going to be talking about for years to come. For you guys, after the game came out, I know you said obviously you didn't expect it to do as big as it did, especially for your first like large scale, game release. Um, Aside from like the size of it, like how many people were on board, what was most surprising to you about like audience reaction after it came out?
I think it was like just how much people understood the story. I
Yeah.
thought a lot more people would miss the Anya thing. And a lot of people do on their first playthrough. To be clear, there's tons of people who play the game and completely don't understand any of the stuff that happened with Anya. That's really common. That was an intended outcome of the game, is that there would be people who just don't get it, and that we didn't want to like push harder for them to get it. We just wanted to kind of leave it as it is, because it also felt like it was really fun for the meta dialogue that some people would like miss it, and the kind of people who miss in the game are like probably have some reflecting to do, that they're probably also the kind of people that might miss it in real life. And often do like this is that kind of thing does just happen. So it felt like, but the point, but still like there's this when a game gets popular like that, it's the like global consciousness of what it's about and some of the more subdued stuff, and it gets to a point where it might almost be like a problem where like you'll make a video on it and everyone's like, what, like there's a twist in that game? Like I thought the whole point was that it was about like X saying that, but like that wasn't obvious in the first few weeks. Like the first, and you notice like every time a streamer picks it up, there's more and more people, and it's like culminates probably especially in that. I mean, you see this is not unique to our game in any way, but what a game's like video essay bait when like a YouTuber starts playing it or a streamer, and everyone in the Twitch chat is immediately like they have to be like, shut the fuck up, you can't analyze it yet. The guy's like 20 minutes into the let's play or whatever. Like that's just
Video
no,
essay bait.
but
Oh.
like it definitely really hit that point. And it's really cool that like when people talk about mouse watching, they talk about the stuff we wanted them to look at in the game. Because like for example, like I would say that how Fish has made analysis, for example, like how Fish has made players still in aggregate don't really understand how Fish is made that well, in my opinion. Like there have been some people that do, but like the best analysis I've ever seen on how Fish is made is just going to be like someone in the YouTube comment section who wrote like a 60 paragraph essay in there or something. But like there's not like, it's not like someone plays the game and then if they don't get it, their chat is like, you don't get it, like you fucking dumbass, like you're supposed to have picked up all these little like seeds of the game that hint at these things or whatever. But in mouse washing, it's like impossible to miss it, because if you play the game, like someone's gonna yell at you almost immediately if you miss something, for better or worse. But yeah, anyway, so that was kind of my take, at least, on what was kind of the most surprising thing, or like just something I never saw
I
seen in
think
this other game.
I think to me, and I want to hear from you two as well. But I think for me, as far as that goes, for one, obviously there are more eyes on mouthwashing than there are how Fish is made, which can point towards more people kind of, because there's, like I mentioned when I posted the video on mouthwashing, there was a wave of people like, what do you mean hidden monster? Don't you understand how like these the situations work and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, but again, we're pretending that I don't know where the story's going at the beginning of the video and stuff like that. But I think I put a disclaimer at the beginning of the video where I was like, if I'm being intentionally dumb, please don't kill me. It's for the sake of the video. um, but I think too, a lot of that probably comes from the sensitivity of the themes. Like, for example, in how Fish is made, which you may hear this and be like, wow, this guy's completely wrong. But to me, it's kind of about how Fish is made is kind of about the illusion of choice. And you could ascribe that to religion, or you could ascribe that to, I don't know. I've heard people talk about the game in reference to like politics and in reference to heaven and hell and stuff like that. But to me, most of that game's about the illusion and about like people's desperation around the illusion. And you could kind of take that to anything, which that's kind of, in my mind, that's kind of a bigger concept that isn't as direct, doesn't touch as many people, hands on. Whereas the concept of mouthwashing is a real, very heavy thing that a lot of people have dealt with or know someone who has dealt with. So, other than just having more eyes on it, I feel like it is a much more sensitive topic, which is why you see people so fervent in like reactions and takeaways and stuff like that. Whereas me, like, I'm a YouTuber, I totally get it. Sometimes you're just playing a game or reading a story and you're not as locked into the themes or the stuff that's happening. So if I see a creator who kind of misses those themes on a Let's Play, it's like, yeah, you just missed the themes. Whereas the audience is like, what, you don't understand how abusive situations work and stuff like that? I understand both sides of why people are so, you know, that why they feel one way or the other about it. But yeah, it is for a game like Mouthwashing, it is unique to see so many people so in touch with the themes or like kind of the quiet part, being said out loud. So yeah, I think that the game definitely stands out from the rest in that respect. Yeah. I think, all right, I'm getting
Yeah,
down the
for
line.
sure.
Johanna, what do you think? Unless it's just the same thing that he said, but what was most surprising to you about like audience reaction when it came out?
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be definitely because I think it's like I can't underline enough how much I was like before this game came out. I was like, I was not looking forward to the launch. I mean, I was looking forward to it because I was like, we can just move on, like we can put the game away and work on something else. And like because the game had such heavy topics, I was like, I was nervous that it was gonna be a bad game with heavy topics, so then the reception would have been like really negative. And that was like a swing that I kind of had to take or we had to take. So on one hand, obviously I'm like, oh cool, this time we managed to like pull it off and do something with even a heavy topic like mouthwashing does. Um, but yeah, it was very strange because yeah, I would when we got some of the first mock reviews, they were pretty good, and I was kind of like, nah, that's not real. Like they're for some reason I thought they were just trying to make us feel better. So it wasn't until I was actually like seeing people play it and even watching streamers play it. I kept waiting. I'm like, they're gonna get bored soon. Oh, they're gonna get bored in the middle of this conversation. They think this conversation is cringe. So it took me a really long time to like believe that people genuinely seemed to enjoy it, and then like I was scared when we were making it that people were gonna be like returning the game, like maybe they would buy it but they would return it so we wouldn't make any money on it or anything like that. So yeah, to then see like to have it the situation do such a like stark 180 where it's like it's way more feedback than I ever expected. It was very like it was overwhelming for sure. And then yeah, people just yeah going into like every aspect of the game. um, it was very a very like strange thing to kind of live through, like really great in a lot of ways and less so in others, but yeah, it's been very very weird. I don't know, yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird. It is a strange thing. I never would have expected it because I definitely thought that what I saw as the best case scenario for mouthwashing was that it would become sort of a how fish is made thing where it's like there's certain people who like these type of very niche games who are like, oh, that was actually a pretty good one. It has a twist and it goes into some topics that you don't really see in mainstream games or something like that. That it would kind of stay as one of those. I certainly didn't expect it to sort of get this like fandom reactions. I was like, well, because it has all these themes and like people aren't gonna want to engage with that on that level. But I think what people have ended up doing a lot is kind of like they've almost divorced a lot of the characters from the story. They just kind of use them as like sort of like avatars or like puppets, which is fine. That's how fandoms work. And it's been very again weird and interesting to see that. And it's a huge privilege, of course, like and so much beautiful and all sorts of like fan creations that we've seen. All like any kind of voice acted content I love to watch, which was why your video was so great. There were some other ones from like professional voice actors that were just like really cool to see, and I was very surprised because I always thought the writing, like I think writing for voice acting versus not is they're like two different things. So I was surprised with how well I think the writing reads even when spoken. Um, yeah, so it's been very like I think very tumultuous, but like I mean, could have gone worse, I guess.
I think it certainly could have gone worse. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very happy. Like I'm very thankful to the fans and the people who have discussed the game, who have created content for it, who have just bought the game, even people who didn't like the game. I always tell people like if you don't particularly like narrative games, like it's fine. You're not really gonna find anything in mouthwashing. Like I understand that perfectly well. Like a lot of our playtesters just I feel like just didn't kind of like the game because they just weren't kind of narrative people. That almost in I think hindsight worked to our advantage because then again it made me like more scared of the overriding in it. Um yeah, and now it's I think the big thing is yeah, it's a scary thing to follow up. That's like a yeah, scary thing.
Well, we'll get to the
Weirdly, that's
follow up.
also what we thought after a Fish's mid. For a Fish's mid, we were like,
Yeah.
it meant so crazy big, we could never make another. Where they're gonna say that we.
It'll
were
never
like,
be
one
big.
time
It's
we
how
hit
fish
wonders
is
without
made.
fish
Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wrong
that's
organ
literally
will forever
what
be
we were
known
saying.
as how fish is made and nothing else. Yeah.
No, but literally, that is literally that playtester I was talking about, who I feel like who as a game developer who I respect very much. Like we actually took like an Uber away from the studio after he had done the playtest, and I was telling him I was like, yeah, I feel so much pressure because how Fish is made went so well, and I think he just told me he's like, they can't all be winners, and I'm like, yeah, best boss. And like now it feels like ridiculous how like the kind of
So
sad
funny.
part is that I thought it would go away after having like a success, but it doesn't. At least for me, it doesn't kind of go away because now I'm like, oh, now I have to follow fucking mouthwashing, which is its own beast. But it's part of the process, I guess.
Well, I think it's also interesting because wherever you go from here, you always made mouthwashing, right? That had such a heavy impact on so many people. And what's really cool about stories to me is like their second and third order effects that you may never know of, right? Like I've been in a lot of writing spaces in the past couple years, and it's like I'll have the privilege to talk to people who are like Hollywood writers or writers on TV shows and stuff. And I always love to ask the question, like, where did you love to write? And most of the time nowadays, people my age or older, their answer is YouTube. They're like, oh, I remember when I was 12 and watched like The Nostalgia Critic or like just all the, or they'll be like, oh, I used to watch, just someone rant about movies and stuff, and that got me interested in film writing. It's like, there's no way when those guys were making YouTube videos 15 years ago, they knew they'd be influencing someone who would go on to write like a huge blockbuster or whatever, but they did. And I think that mouthwashing touched a lot of people in a very personal way that I guarantee you there's so many stories out there that are being created now that wouldn't have been created had it not been for this game. So I think wherever you guys go from here, which I have very high hopes, as we'll talk about in a second, but I think wherever you go, you win here, and that speaks for itself.
Thank you.
And then finally, Martin, was there anything about the game coming out that kind of had you shocked?
I mean, yes, and it's more so like a singular story of like how my brother found out about the game, and I keep telling this is like, you know what, you make something that you've spent like, I want to say it was a year and a couple of months, right, for the development as a whole. And you keep talking to family members about like, oh, I'm doing this game. It's narrative focused. It's set in space. Blah blah blah. Blah, right? You're trying to like get them invested in what you do, but they don't really know what games are. They don't know how about like how games are made and like the whole process of them. And so like it's just kind of like, whew, right, just right past them. Game comes out, and my brother like messages me afterwards and say, "Hey, did you make this game? I found it through TikTok." I'm like, okay, but like not through me. Okay, I've been telling you about this fucking game that I've been working on, but like it kind of just like escapes you at some point, and like it's the surprising part is partly that, right? My brother not finding it through me, but through like TikTok, and it's like you put out something that you worked on, and your expectations are kind of set pretty low, like Johanna was mentioning earlier. The surprising part to me is not so much like that it blew up, but more so how much it blew up and in what spaces it blew up, and like where your own grasp as the developer or creator of this piece of work kind of like ends. and I'm amazed at how many people have like taken this thing that you've worked on and have taken it so closely to heart. It's really emotional seeing so many stories of the survivors. I feel like we've touched on this earlier, who have reached out to us and said thank you for making this game, that they see themselves in some of these characters and kind of recognize that. And that I don't think there's anything that I could be more proud of than just hearing somebody who feels seen, you know, in a piece of work like this. And it's surprising, but in the best way. Right?
Well, I think that also, is a credit to just how well everything in the game works together, because like every story, assuming it has some semblance of reality, is going to be about someone or some kind of person, right? Like either an event happened to, or, historical event, whatever. And I think it is very telling when the people who feel that they can relate to that story feel seen in it in a good way. And I think there's a lot of stories too where you'll hear obviously people who were victims of that kind of thing will talk about, oh, I feel like this did us dirty. I feel like this was poor representation or whatever, but I've never heard that complaint out of Mouthwashing. And I think that is kind of just, it goes to show the care that you guys crafted the story with, because it is a very sensitive topic and it's a very hard one to get right, but I think you guys certainly did. To the degree I will hear Mouthwashing cited as an example of doing that justice. So I think you guys certainly, as Johanna said, could always be worse. I think you guys did a great job as far as that goes. Well, I appreciate y'all taking so much time out of your day for this too. It means a lot.
No,
No,
it would
this is
be
okay.
it would be the fool's errand to be like, guy who makes 8-hour YouTube videos invited me to do a YouTube video. Surely it'll be short.
It'll be a short interview, right? This guy,
Yeah.
he respects
Yeah.
his time, right? Guy with an 11-hour video, for sure. Well, all right. So now back in the saddle, not a Pony Express joke. So so you made Mouthwashing. The reaction was incredible. And you guys kind of have free reign now, within the studio to kind of make whatever you want. So where does a game like Carcass CLAD come in? Because I'll nerd out about it in a second. I'm excited for the concept, but it is a very big departure from like what Mouthwashing was, it seems. So where did you guys decide to do this now?
Yeah, it was definitely it was a whole thing, like, because it's really like what we were gonna do after Mouse Watching was a big question, but you might be surprised that it's actually the question mostly answered before finishing Mouse Watching. Like we were talking about, I remember pitching Carcass Clad to at like Gamescom when we were showing off Mouse Watching before it released. So like the idea had been like heavily floating around like even before release, because I think we knew like getting to the end of that project, and Johanna will probably be able to speak to this more, but like we were pretty tuckered out making like Mouse Washing is just a very specific kind of game to make, and it was just really tough. Like it involves like having so much writing that's kind of blocking being able to do anything else, and it's like a really tough position to be in for a writer. And then also like now that we didn't have like another like great narrative game idea immediately, because like most of us, you can't just like sit down and say, now we're going to make like a deeply impactful narrative game. Like you have to have an idea for one and then you make it. And so we just didn't really like we didn't have something that like super spoke to us at the time, and we were like, damn, it would be nice to do something else. And also like we know that like if we put out another game that's enough, because like man, Mouse Washing compared to How Fish is Made, like How Fish is Made's like, it's real, like it works for what it is, but it was so obvious to like, how do you make a game better than How Fish is Made? You make big fish game. Like it's like another narrative walking sim, but you make it larger, you make it a little more real, like so it felt like a very direct line. But then Mouse Washing doesn't, like 8-hour Mouse Washing isn't like a significantly, or isn't like a better game at all. Like there's not like a way to just like scale up Mouse Washing. Like you just have to have like another idea that's even better for a narrative. And so that's so anyway, we were like, we don't want to make something that's just gonna be compared to our last thing. Like I would say like I'd think a lot about like Soma because Soma's probably the game, like if Mousewashing's like, dear God, I want to be like have the kind of impact a game had, it would be Soma. Like that would probably be the comparison point. And like I think I think the most like functional choice after Soma, because there was obviously like another game after that's probably like in the annals of history will be much less fondly remembered. But then you have something like The Bunker that comes out, and The Bunker's such a fucking good game, but it's nothing like Soma. And like I want Carcass Clad to be like what people to look at it was the same dichotomy, where it's like this studio is like, we know they can do one thing, and they're going to take some of the building blocks and some of the atmosphere and do something that's like nothing like it and nothing like you'd expect, and to kind of end up in a place where we're not like a walking sim studio, we're a studio that's always making something that's like pushes the boundaries in a little way, in some way. And Mousewashing 2, or a game like Mousewashing, doesn't push boundaries anymore because those boundaries were already pushed by us last time. So like yeah, so it's just like a huge swing in a completely different direction. And we have no clue if it's gonna work. But we also had no clue Mousewashing was gonna work, so it seems like a pretty good place to be. But that's pretty much it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so. I love the idea of Carcass Clad. I think it's such a cool like not only you guys doing it, but just objectively the idea of like a tank game in a destroyed city, but with like body horror, gross gore elements and stuff like that. And then I was reading, I think it was on the Steam page or something. It said that there's like eldritch growths throughout the city and stuff. Just chef's kiss, right up my alley. So I'm already signed on from day one. But I also, in reading it, it seems like this is going to be a very unique kind of gameplay design from, like, I guess what you typically mention. I think I read somewhere it's like each session is like a 2 to 3 hour game. So I guess implying off of that, there's like different sessions with like different stuff you can place, or are there different routes and stuff procedurally generated? Like, what would a play session look like?
Yeah, so I can add some context on that. So the 2 to 3 hour sig is a big like it's mostly just like for the Steam page we wrote that, where we're just like, we want to have someone have a vague idea of like not thinking you can get off work and play it for 20 minutes and put it down. Like it's not that kind of game, but it's like, look, we never know how long a sig is going to actually be while during development. Like we'll know how long it takes to play a session of Carcass Clad the day we release it and watch someone play it. That's really like Mousewashing. We had no clue Mousewashing would be 2 hours for development. This is kind of the same case. So that the numbers for that are like a little bullshit, honestly.
Okay.
But in general, Carcass Clad is a semi-proceduralized like experience where it's not like a roguelite or anything. We're not aiming for it to be a game people are like replaying and replaying and replaying. I would describe it like a Left 4 Dead campaign. Like if it's like if like Left 4 Dead had one.
That's all you had to say.
Where it's like you have like there's a game director that's like, like things are changing each run, just especially to make sure that if you die like halfway through a level and restart that level, you're not going to know where everything is, because there's a person, the tank, whose whole job is to like find out where things are. So it gets kind of difficult. Like your commander gets pretty bored if you have like you're running through a level you've already played. So you have enough proceduralization to make that stuff work. But ultimately, like, we're looking for probably like multiple ending structure, couple different ways you can play. But like it's no more. It's probably like a few play sessions where you're doing like tank stuff, safe room, tank stuff, safe room. That's at least what we have right now. But there's things are very open to change at this point in development for almost everything.
Interesting. Okay. I already see some stuff in like the trailer and the limited thing you've put out where it's like, oh, I can only imagine where it'll go. Like, I think it might be the gunner or one of the perspectives you can see your own eyes whenever you flip down. I'm sure that is gonna come back to haunt me at some point in the game. And like, so again, I know a lot of this you guys probably want to say for closer to release, which I understand, but like, okay, there's this abandoned city and there's this faction in it where these devotees have like these carcasses that they're attaching to the side of tanks as armor, I guess, or some like religious purpose. And for one, I love that you guys found another excuse to be gnarly and grisly with a lot of the elements. It works so well, especially in the art style. But so off of that description, are these humans in the tanks you're going up against still? Or are they like some? Because between knowing your guys' stuff and seeing like the bloody cows and imagery and all that, that could be like a cow person in the tank for all I know that you're fighting. Is this another faction of people out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do we want to say? Like,
You can
about
say no
more-
comment too.
Just-
That's also
No,
completely
it's like-
reasonable.
like honestly, like we don't have like strict rules on this right now of like what we can say, because I think it's like a lot of it, like we're not even sure how much is gonna like we have like a big ass lore things for this game because it's actually like shared universe with some other game ideas we have. So like there's there's a lot of like background shit that may just like never even make it in this project. So we're very like, I don't know if we're super decided on exactly how much we like want to say about it. Sorry, Johanna.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to know where to draw the line, especially because this game is as you can probably imagine, like working on mouthwashing. It was like the narrative and the like dialogue, especially like kind of took precedent over everything else. So like everything was making way for the dialogue and the conversations and narrative. And this is the like absolute exact opposite, where it's like the gameplay is driving the tank, if you will. So like it's it's a very different beast to tackle as the writer. Like I'm fitting in kind of lore where I can. It's a lot of it's just in the world building and sort of just the characters talking to each other. Uh, so it's not gonna have as like sort of standard structured story in it as the mouthwashing did. But we'll try and put in like a lot to like charm people, I guess. I we can say like the enemies in the enemy types, they're cultists. We can say that much. Called cultists. Uh, and the city you're in called Vorgorod, and you're going up against the Green Lion cult. And in terms of like just some of the more stranger elements, where we're drawing a lot from Finnish mythology, so that's a clue, I guess. I guess that's kind of the only thing I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I like yeah, so it's generally like the people you're fighting generally humans, but then we also have this kind of there's kind of a cult thing, but it's also like a military thing. It's like ostensibly like faction who's lost a war, and they're kind of like on the it's just like kind of insurgents like leftover
Gotcha.
that
would explain
from
the
like
tanks.
last time, and now they've just had their like kind of day of like divinity where they kind of got everything they wanted, and now there's and part of that is this growth around the city of this like meat and gold and food and like all these kind of things of like splendor that they have, and they're doing their most with it, i.e. like ripping cows off the walls and strapping them to their tanks.
Yeah, so that the is that done, which again you can say, wait till later. Are the cows being attached to tanks for like symbolic purposes, or is there actually like a utilitarian reason to put the cow on the tank?
So for some reason, it's actually phenomenal armor.
Okay.
It's the armor system in the game.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, if it's a cow, you shoot cow explode. Armor penetrating shell inexplicably doesn't hurt tank underneath. But the but yeah, so like because it's really hard to explain like we play like some tank games at some squad and stuff. We have a guy who couldn't make it for this interview, but we have Genshin Dave, who's like the tank guy. He plays all the tank sims and stuff. I played like a decent amount of squad with him and stuff, but so it's like we know a lot of like the kind of like realistic expectations like a sim player would have for a tank game. And damn tank armor and like where to shoot a tank is really complicated. Like, you know, and we're not trying to go like full War Thunder with it. And it's really hard. Like, you have this thing made of metal, like, and you have to define like where are the weak spots. And we don't want to have like the Helldivers, like big glowing parts of like that are like fictionalized things on the tanks. So we kind of went with the idea that like if metal is like the flesh of a tank, like the thing you're actually aiming at, then like flesh is going to be the armor on the tank effectively. So like that's the so like if you see cow, that's like this thing you're trying to kind of hit between.
Okay, I gotcha. All right, that makes sense. That answers a lot of questions. Will you, the player, be able to put cows on your tank?
Unfortunately, no. It's like we I think there's a point in development we were like, damn, people are gonna ask if they can put people want to put cows on their tank. We found that like since you're so locked inside the tank for pretty much the whole game, like you're only seeing the outside if you're like sticking your head out of the hatch. So it's pretty challenging to like have like a comprehensive understanding of your own like armor layout. So it doesn't work like most of it. Pretty much everything you do to your vehicle is like focused on the inside, and then what enemies do is kind of focused on the outside, just of the kind of perspectives that you're in. There may be some like shenanigans that happens in your tank, but it's not like customization or
Sure.
armor related.
Yeah, you're not going to get 10 headshots and put a new camo on the dashboard or anything like that. At least not a traditional camo, maybe cow eyes or something, but so the game currently is 3-player co-op, or at least that's all the announcements, which is sick. I've already decided who I'm streaming with and who I'm gonna get to do stuff for it.
Dave's so excited. Dave wants to see Drewski play it so bad.
So the team
I know you
is going to be
saw you add a
me,
bunch of
yeah, me, Drew, and Mr. GG. I think we're going to play through the first time. And he's excited too. He's messaged me on the side. He's like, the mouthwashing guys? I'm like, uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were hit with that trailer where they were like, "Oh, the mouthwashing devs." They're like, "The mouthwashing devs? This is what they're coming up with?"
Well,
Yeah,
I love horror of war stuff. Come and See is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and there's so much you can do with it. I forget the name of the movie, but there's one horror movie with Andy Serkis about the trenches of World War I, and it's about like a fog lays over the trench, and then as they're moving through it, like these like very Dead Space necromorph-esque things
I
come out
think
of
I
the
know
mud.
exactly what movie you mean.
little worm things, right? Like I remember back when Overlord was coming out, the like World War II zombie movie. There was another movie coming at the same time. It was like a World War I one.
This World War
Is
I
it Death
one's-
Watch?
I think that's it. Death Watch. Is that like 2005? I think it was pre 2010.
Yeah, 2002 it
Okay,
says.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
that one. So that movie is like it's a group of soldiers. I think it's British and German who run into each other, and they don't know what's going on. And then like these monsters start to rise out of the mud. There's a part where like barbed wire comes up and rips through, I think, Andy Serkis and kills him. But it's like using the actual trenches as a setting for a horror movie, very similar to The Bunker. But like I love the horror of war setting. So when I saw you guys were like doing a story set in like a war-esque or like, you know, post-apocalyptic war, whatever environment, I was like, let's go. Absolutely. So I love it even off the concept. But there's a lot of stuff there that seems like kind of like you said, world building between like even on the Steam page, reading about like, you know, the growths that are happening over the city. Something else I thought was interesting is all 3 of the crew members have some mention that they're kind of reluctantly here, you know, like none of them's like a seasoned soldier. It's like, oh, they have to fight. So is this threat, the cultist threat, of the thing they're bringing like worldwide, or at least spreading to like their homelands and stuff like that? So they have to defend it.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely like a bigger conflict. It's like, yeah, we're very much like zooming in on a very small, like literally very small, because it's like you're pretty much it's this one tank crew, but it's implied that there's a much bigger conflict going on. The like direct inspiration is the Winter War between the Soviet Union and Finland. Obviously, that one was like the Soviets invading Finland. So this isn't that setting that we have. Like this one conflict that you're going into is not that, but the like the city that you're in, Wargorod, is sort of it isn't like Earth. You're not on Earth. So Gorgorod is in a country called Yemba, and then your player characters are from a country called Sabori, which is they're pretty direct parallels. Like the Finnish word for Finland is Suomi. And, we have the Savorians and stuff. It's like that's sort of like starting blocks of the themes of the game. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
I
no.
will men-
Yeah.
Oh, I will just quickly add, it's a little weird. Can't really explain exactly like all the details of it, but like you're not actually like the war is not against the cult. The cult are kind of just there. Like you're like effectively like retreating from like some real like shit's gone bad, and like to get back to friendly lines, you're like effectively got like supply runs through this like city that's kind of like a no man's land because there's still all the people from like last war are still hanging out there, like the ostensibly like a insurgent force. And so like the cultists are not like the direct antagonists. Like you're not even really expecting them to be there.
Interesting. Okay. I think it's such an interesting concept because I feel like there's so much that can be done with the idea of a tank crew that isn't really done a lot in video games. The only one that comes to mind is I think it was Battlefield 5 had a campaign called
That was
The Last
number one
Tiger.
inspo. That was
Really?
that was a game video while playing The Last Tiger.
Really?
Yeah,
That's sick.
but
That's so cool.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, no, I was playing The Last Tiger and I was like, if this wasn't like Battlefield tank controls, this would go crazy. Like if you just like fully made a game around this concept and it wasn't just like the kind of arcadey tank controller ported from a multiplayer game. But the back then the plan was for it to be a single player game where you were switching between controlling all three people in the vehicle, and then it was actually gonna be like third person, but in the vehicle with the camera like orbiting around the characters, so it would still be like much more narrative focused than it ended up being, and then it kind of shifted into a co-op game. But yeah, Last Tiger and Fury are like the two big.
Yep,
like,
I was gonna say Fury's the best example in a film
Fury.
that's done it. Yeah. Which I love Fury, and I can't remember a single other campaign in Battlefield 5, but I love The Last Tiger, especially that end scene with the soldier kind of deserting and walking off, and it's like what are we doing, Hans? That whole scene, I still remember everything about that.
It so is shockingly Kino for how shockingly un-Kino every other
Yes.
campaign that game is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even down to like the aesthetics of like the rain falling and like him, throwing his hands up, and then the rookie being the one who takes the shot because he's still dedicated to the cause, and like all the, like it is not something I expected out of a Battlefield game. But I am happy to hear that was main inspiration because I love that campaign so much.
Oh, it's so awesome. It's so good.
And I feel like I don't think of any examples because again, I know you guys haven't. I don't think you've put anywhere that Carcass CLAD is explicitly horror, but there's definitely at least body horror elements between the carcasses and the stuff like that. I can't think of an example of a tank thing touching horror. Maybe vignettes in movies, but
Yeah, it's definitely not like I think one of the reasons we chose to make this game, because like outside of having like a couple like Dave who knows a lot about tanks, like there's not really anything that pushes our team specifically to make a tank game instead of some other kind of game. But I think like we noticed there's definitely like a bit of hole in the market where like everything's about like a spaceship or like a submarine or something, especially after Iron Lung, and it seemed like a really like I think especially like watching Fury, it's like so easy to imagine how this could be a horror movie. And it has like a lot of that DNA in it already. And then also like it was kind of a mix of like seeing that potential and then also seeing like, there's so many like a tank experience can work so well. And we've seen it work well because there's these like giant player count multiplayer games where it's so fucking cool to play in a tank with your two friends. And when like it works, like when you're like tank crewing in squad and it like feels right, it's so good. But like, we recognize that there's a group of players who probably don't want to be getting like dressed down by their like match commander for like 40 minutes about being out of position before they get to like shoot at something. And so, we think there's kind of room to like take kind of part of like the energy that you want from like a milsim game, and the kind of like teamwork and like the kind of meat of that, and then also take some of this kind of like tank fantasy that's already so intertwined with being a horror thing if it's done well, just by nature of how like tough it is. And like Iron Lung, it's a great example because the idea of like if you think about the fantasy of Iron Lung of like I'm in it's like tiny desk box coffin and I can't leave and like I can barely see outside and I have no clue what's going on and there's something like hunting me. Like that feeling is already like that could be describing a tank thing. So it just seemed like a really right mix.
Hmm. I can see that. I think something interesting too about the tank setting is like you said, between moving from Soma to the bunker, it's like it was such a departure for the studio, the two different games. But there was bones between the two you could kind of see. Like when I think of the two games, the first thing that comes to mind is in both of them, you are trapped in this like subterranean, faraway place. And every now and then you kind of get these glimpses of the top. Like in Soma, you'd stand in the open ocean, or in the bunker, you would look up out of the trench and you could see the battle happening, overhead. So it's kind of like they're totally different stories and settings, but they kind of use similar set pieces they learned previously. And it's almost like, but with you guys from Mouthwashing to Carcass Clad, in both, it is a compressed team put into, a place, whatever the place may be, in a hostile environment where they have to stay inside of the thing. Um, and whereas in that one, it's like in Mouthwashing, it's like, the reaches of space. This is like a tank crew on a battlefield with threats around the outside of them. So I can see it's certainly a different environment that you can tell different stories in, but I can kind of see the whispers of, Mouthwashing kind of crossing in a good way, I think. Um, as far as Johanna, for you on the writing side, because like you said, this is a much more gameplay driven experience, but there's still like three characters at least that you get to write for and stuff like that. Um, how do you think your time with Mouthwashing has kind of influenced your character writing style, like moving into Carcass Clad?
Well, that's a great question. I think, yeah, I'm a lot more confident with kind of presenting pretty like simplified characters. I think off of like just kind of introducing them as simple and not really worrying in the beginning that people can kind of tell that they fit into certain stereotypes, but then hopefully having like a bit more like depth come out later. I think that can be something that can be kind of scary to kind of like lean on a stereotype in the beginning. I think like yeah, are the three characters that we've introduced, your player characters. I mean, they're not going to be as deep. I mean, I can completely say that because they are mouth washing, but I think you do still need to get like some sort of like overarching character traits from them, just almost by looking at them, uh, and then with whatever time we have in the game to have them interact. I think the big like thing with this game is gonna be selling their interactions between each other, so that you kind of believe them as a crew because that should ideally reflect your interactions with your fellow players on some sort of like you should be almost on the sort of same journey as them. But it is very different to write for this versus writing for mouthwashing. Just also like on just like there's much more like technical information because everything is pretty fantasy based and or completely based in mouthwashing. And we could hand wave a lot of stuff because like it just wasn't relevant to like anything outside of the ship just kind of really wasn't relevant. With this, like you have to explain, I think some things a lot more like, or ideally just at least thought them out, even if they don't end up in the final product. But yeah, I think the three characters that we've landed on, I'm happy with them, and it was just fun to design new characters. Uh, so yeah, they're not going to be talking during gameplay to each other, and hopefully like in the safe rooms and stuff, and we'll get some of that like banter and whatever tension maybe between the characters.
Cool, cool, awesome. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm excited to see what all you guys do with the sandbox sort of that you've created for yourself. Um, I'm sure whatever it is going to be terrifying. I'm sure it'll keep me up. Um, what Martin, you like doing the sound design, a lot of the art design stuff like that. Is there anything you can reveal that you're excited for with Carcass CLAD?
Yeah, I think one thing that we really try and emphasize in this game is how tactile everything is, that you are trapped in this space, that you're kind of helming this beast, this like tank, right? This rinky dinky tank, sure, but it's like it's powerful as fuck if you know how to use it. So for me, the challenge is to convert the idea of like narrative importance for mouthwashing, like what sound does narratively in mouthwashing. Gameplay is something that I now need to shift my focus to, where like I need to make sure that the purpose of sound is to not enhance a kind of story that kind of happens just by like sound being there, right? You're telling a story, but like implied. But here, I need to focus on making sure that the tank feels right, that the engine roars the exact way that would make it like imposing and not necessarily like, oh, I'm not in a powerful machine that I have control over. Like what I do with it is kind of like, yeah, I'm a limited resources, fuel's going down. Those are the kind of things that's my task as a sound designer this time around, is to teach the player how to helm something that feels bigger than yourself, right? That is still controllable, but that is just like, if you don't know how to use this, that's kind of sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
I respect that. That's pretty cool. I think I saw a bunch of stuff saying that like everything in there is like controllable. There's no like free movements or stuff like that. As far as that goes, because I know people in my audience will care. Is there like a specific tank you modeled this off of, like the tank within the game?
No. So the systems in the XEO are like come from a lot of different things, from like different reference from different vehicles, but this tank is pretty much entirely fictional, and because also the era of technology they have is not like analogous to an exact part of world history either.
Speaking of,
Like they're using a
is this set in a specific timeline or time frame? I know you said some
no,
Earth,
because
but
the world's like completely fictional that it's set in, so like there's no like it's kind of another thing that it might share with mouse washing is that it still has a bit of that like retro future angle, maybe like a little more diesel punk this time, but like the tank is really focused on being very analog, but there's also like insane technology in it that like is probably like unfeasible by even like modern standards. But then for some reason, like you're still actuating things with levers that you'd never be in real life. And it's really like we've broken a lot of like we always want designing the tank has taken we have spent so long designing this tank to be right. It is like a monumental task to make a space that you're only interacting with your mouse that's interesting with three players asymmetrically acting together for that like for like long play sessions. Like it is a very experimental game because everything you're controlling is like click and drag, like a frictional game. Like there's no like it there'll be maybe a little more keyboard stuff later, but right now it's like it's only mouse controlled, the builds we have at the moment. So you're just like, which like one of the things that means is we want like everything's really focused on being very physical. So like something that might just be like a little button that you press in like a real tank is like a giant lever you have to switch in this one because we want to have like everything be like a drag movement. There's no like pressing, and so like there's and a lot of like weird mixes like that. Like with the tanks using like a weird mix between it's like half an autoloader and then like half loaded manually, where like it's like an autoloader that you have to like drag with a giant lever and then you pull it on the back to these two like big revolver cylinders that are automatic, that like feed in and out of like the main breech, like stuff like that. Like you'd never, it's just so weird and over engineered. Like but we do want to have that respect for like what a tank player the way I would describe it like is that we would want to be what for like a tank game, what like Hunt Showdown is to like a gun game, where it's like you still obviously the people who make Hunt like understand guns really well. Like there's so much attention to detail, but like there's also like goofy shit in Hunt Showdown that wouldn't work, and that they have to hand wave a lot of like the kind of technicals because it's like a cool monster hunting thing. And we're very similar. Like we want to like we want this to be like I'm in a tank and this feels like someone who understands the reality. Like the tank experts react video on our game should be like, damn, they know how tanks are. But like we are willing to break a lot of rules to make this thing like a good co-op game.
I see. So it's kind of like it's not any tank, but you are also not just like redefining what a tank is. You're not just like, oh, well, we're going to pretend that they load this way or drive this way and stuff like that.
Yeah, like we want to take like what are the core parts of like the fantasy. Like I can't see, it's like really hard to see out of it. Everyone has this kind of like very asymmetric like feeling. You want to make sure the commander is someone who feels like they have their eyes on everything, and everyone else is kind of like just staring out at these like tiny little vision ports. And we know we want like the tank to be very like space optimized. Like it's not like, because every vehicle game that's co-op, like if it's like Guns of Icarus or like Barotrauma or something, it's always like you're in like a quite a large space where you're all walking around between different stations that you stop at and interact with. And that was like fundamentally never going to work for a tank game. Because like if you can walk around a tank, someone's designed your tank like wrong. It's just like it's supposed to be like I have enough room for my arms to move to like the things I need to touch, and then like that's kind of it, because anything else is like they just keep cramming it down. And we've done the same thing in our design. Like we want to have like very little dead space. It should be like efficient and very and feel like claustrophobic the way a real tank does. It's probably one of the biggest like realistic aspects about it. But yeah, I mean, we could talk forever about exactly how the tank works. There's so much bullshit because we've had to model like every gear in this thing is like a physical component that we had to model and do the measurements for and make sure it all fits. And we have an artist who's been
Yeah,
slaving
no,
away,
Yasmin's
like
back. Yasmin's back. She's doing the tank now. First, we give her just all the worst stuff to do on mouthwashing, and now we're like, "Oh, can you make like an entirely like tactile tank that functions for 3 people? Thank you, and it helps us to be realistic enough for all the tank nerds.
like
Thanks." But yeah, she's been doing a great job. But she works very closely with Dave, who is like the tank guy on our team.
Man, that's so cool. I like that idea. I like how everything, from the descriptions, it kind of sounds like it is an other Earth of sorts, where it's like, yeah, these things could exist, kind of, but it's just like an alternate history almost of how like timelines went and stuff. That's pretty cool. That's pretty sick. There was, I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I feel like a lot of them kind of breach into like spoiler territory, so I don't want to get too far into it. The description on the Steam page said Eldritch, which is one of those buzzwords that activates me. Is that kind of thing. So it's like we see cultists in the tank and stuff like that. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe hypothetically as the game progresses, may more of these Eldritch things kind of come into play on the gameplay side of things.
sorry, I don't know. I feel like it might just I don't remember it saying Eldritch on the store page.
Maybe I'm getting it
Links here.
wrong. Maybe
I
I'm
think it might just be like I just want to make sure it's not like because people have done like a lot of press releases about the game,
yeah.
and like not everything is like 100%, because I don't think we would normally describe this as like an Eldritch horror game.
Oh yeah, it's
a very like
thing's
that's a
gone
very
'cause I had to
deliberate
restart my
term.
computer. Hold on. There was a word that activated. Maybe in my head I got too excited and said Eldritch.
No, I mean,
I'm willing to admit that. But
I don't mean to be like nitpicky, but
no, you're good.
Eldritch horror is a very something
Chimeric.
that like
Chimeric. Okay.
chimeric, yeah.
That's it. My bad. Never mind. All right. Are those threats? Are those chimeric threats?
Yes. So like, actually, maybe Johanna, do you want to comment on this or?
I mean, all I would say is that it's a very specific word to use, of course. Chimeric, I think it's just a cool word in general, but um Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much we wanna talk about
That's
it.
totally fine. That's totally fine. It's totally fine to have stuff saved for later. Um, I think that just the descriptions of the aesthetics is so cool between like a war torn area and you know, the cultist in tanks using cows as armor and stuff like that. It's just such a cool idea. Um,
Yeah.
like I said, it's kind of hard to talk about the game before a lot of it comes out because there's so much I want to talk about, but I also understand, it's a lot of things are better to wait and see. Um, I guess one more question to kind of ask about story and stuff like that is between the three people within the tank, was this kind of goes back to when I asked questions about how mouthwashing was put together. For these three individuals, is this kind of a story, like their character story, something about them that you wanted to tell, or was it more so you had the setting, so then you needed three people that made sense within that setting? Like, what came first?
Yeah, it was setting driven this time that we had like again because like it's the whole thing that like it's the gameplay that's driving what the story can be. So when we decided, okay, it's 3 people co-op game, we're gonna need 3 characters. So that's why we ended up with these 3 characters. So it's different from mouthwashing, but like trying to make it good.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm excited to see where you guys go with it. One question I did want to ask is 3-player co-op. I'm excited for and all that. Are you able to play the game by yourself?
Yeah, so the pretty much the situation is the tank is there are 3 people in the tank, no matter like who you have in your lobby. Like it's always the same 3 characters in the same seats. But which character you're playing as is something that if you're like one person playing the game, you can just be like pressing hotkeys on your keyboard to like switch between which like player you're inhabiting in the lobby. So technically you can like solo the game, but it means that like actions that we've balanced to be like 3 people are all doing something at the same time talking to each other is now like you are doing all of them and just needing to switch. Like every time you want to like start the tank moving or steer it, now I have to switch to Taisto and then like pull the helm forward, and then I have to like go back to being the commander so I can see where the hell I'm going. And it gets like very it's not the intended experience. Like we want to make a game that is willing to like take the risk to be like pretty obtuse to play in anything but our intended format. Kind of like a Hazelight game, like where you get that like it only works with X amount of players, but it is playable. And I'm sure there are some like psychos out there that are going to like game
Yeah.
like that. And we're actively looking into finding ways to make the experience more manageable for a single player. But it's very like we're never gonna compromise the co-op experience for it, and making any design changes to the tank to facilitate it is off the table because like we've talked about like what little tank for one person or like littler tank for 2 people, like Sea of Thieves style. Oh my god, making these tanks takes so fucking long. And we're like, it is
It will
so
be
painful
the tank.
engineering it.
You get one tank and you like it. You figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Just like in
guarantee.
real war.
Yeah, just like a real war. It's your tank.
Yeah.
If you're alone in it, you
Me
got to move
too.
seats. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there will day one be people sweaty as possible, just like hot spamming between the different seats and getting stuff and things like that. But I can appreciate the design dedication to where it does become more difficult if you are by yourself versus, the intended way to play. I can get behind that, especially because like my intention is going to be I'm going to play it for the first time with friends, like get the full experience and stuff. But then I'm going to be running through that thing so many times, on my own for like gameplay or recording or trying to find different stuff. So I think that, I mean, it's obviously not out yet, but hypothetically, I think the design works to, I can be introduced to it with a group of people, get the full experience, and then from there, like, all right, let's start suffering. Let's start figuring out like where to move and stuff like that. So I could get behind that. I think that's an interesting idea. I also think like, which this is probably a hot take to some, but my favorite games are the ones that require a certain amount of suffering. Like, the game I play more than anything else is Escape from Tarkov. And that game hates you, despises you so much. It won't even, like, it'll tell you where exits are on maps the first time you play. It doesn't tell you what the map looks like or what the exit means. You just gotta try to, hopefully you have an internet connection to figure that out. But
like I had all the apps on my phone back when I used to play for like the hot checking the market and like get the like live interactive maps and stuff that you just have like a separate application.
yeah,
This community made
it's like the
so
game
fucked up.
understands that it hurts. It knows what it's doing to you. And I'm not saying that mouthwashing's to that, or sorry, the carcass clad is to that extreme or anything like that. But I do think, especially given the setting where it's kind of like this very Soviet bloc-esque rundown, Cold War looking kind of destroyed area, I think a little suffering is probably good. Probably helps with the aesthetic and stuff like that. And also, like, I mean, there's so many. I think audiences kind of vie for that a bit more, especially because so many games, especially in like the AAA market, are designed to be so accessible to people who can't play games that well, that I think that's why there's kind of a craving for games that are tougher, that, don't hold your hand as much and stuff like that. So basically all that to say, I like the idea that if you're by yourself, you just got to figure it out. And also, like, it's a depressing, gray, disturbing world. Like, it's not, you're not going to get any guardrails here. So I can respect that.
Yeah, I mean, even with 3 players, it's a pretty challenging experience right now, especially. A lot of like onboarding stuff we're still like working out the details for, but like in general, this is like definitely like a tough game to just pick up and like play. Like we are trying to, or like the goal one is to make sure that it's just like the tank is interesting enough to spend time in, and then kind of everything else is like secondary to that. So there's like this is definitely like a yelling at your friends kind of game, and there's a lot of like where we really want like that we're not targeting like only like sim players are not the like primary target of this game, but it is like we want someone who's like a sim player to play this game and like feel like their like knowledge they're bringing into it of how to like use a tank is being respected. Like people like if you're like a squad who have been playing tanks and that forever, and then you hop into Carcass, like you are definitely going to be dramatically better at the game than somebody who's like hopping in out of just like having never played a game like that. Kind of the same way I'd almost say like I think like Helldivers is like that for like milsim players with like a lot of mechanics where it's like half of like the Helldivers mechanics are actually like tack shooter things, and like the game still totally works if you're not that kind of person, but you can tell that like the person who played this game has played those kind of games, the person who made this game. And so we're kind of hit that dichotomy with it. But yeah, no, it's gonna be a experience that's definitely gonna like kick your ass a little bit.
Perfect.
To get it all right.
That's even better. I can't wait. I also love yelling at my friends, Drew specifically, so that should work out.
There you go.
Well, I'm certainly excited for it. Like I said, there's a lot of questions I could ask, but we'll save until later on. Maybe we'll do another interview after the game comes out to kind of talk about lore and stuff like that if you guys are down. I guess at this time, is there anything else you want to say about Carcass Clad? Anything else that I didn't talk about or you want to talk about that you think would be cool at this stage?
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, I'm thinking the one thing is like if you picked up on the word Kyberic on the Steam page, listen to the teasers and the trailer and figure out why there's more than one animal screaming. It's the one thing I will say.
So I did suspect that there might be some amalgamation stuff like that going on, especially with the growths and stuff like that. So maybe there's like fusion happening between different animal types or just flesh.
I'm not saying nothing. I'm not.
You know, I don't think we have any other big things. Like we're still in pretty like vague posting territory about the game right now. The like and honestly, like part of that just like the reality development is like they're all also just like a lot of things are going to change before we ship this thing. Like we to be able to make like especially a very like systemic like small space game like this, and because we focus so much on like making the tank and the co-op gameplay feel good, like we're feeling very willing to like start like breaking and ripping apart things to make sure that like the fantasy works. So there's a lot of like kind of open to change. I mean, even since announcing the game, I can say we've already like made design changes to how certain gameplay mechanics work, because it's like you can kind of tell there's like certain parts of the fantasy where someone's told like I get to play a tank game, and they're like, but surely it has this, and we were like, oh, it didn't have that though. And now it's like,
Yeah.
and now we're like kind of like going back and maybe like reconsidering certain things. It's always like this is a very live process. Most washing changed so much before we shipped it. Like just in those last like few months, you never know. So it's because we're not used to like we announced mouse washing so early compared to when it came out, but just no one gave a fuck. So, it wasn't like there was no
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
pressure of like, "Oh, this is our first time like need to have like the media training to be like, what do you say about your game?" Because every time before, it's like someone like if someone's asking you, like if you're lucky enough that somebody would be willing to ask you something about your game, and then you say an answer that it's like some huge spoiler, then like 5 people hear it. Like you have to as like a small indie just be like, it doesn't matter. Like nothing, like
Yeah.
no one will
Yeah.
ever hear anything I say, and like 98% of the people that play mouse washing if this game does well will have never seen a piece of pre-release marketing we've ever done. And CARCASS Web's like now we're like a real ass company. Like people actually want to see what we make. So it's like very weird for us to be just to have the questions, I guess, like just to be in that experience. It's very strange.
Now you're in a place where you have to keep stuff safeguarded. Yeah. Yeah. How big were you guys when you did mouthwashing, and how big are you now, personnel wise?
So we've upped by on development. We're only one person more, but we lost one after mouse washing and picked up 2 for Carcass. And then we have like a marketing person. So I think in total, like the company's like 10 people now.
Okay. And man, gosh, you guys get so much done with that. Very impressive. So I think if no one else has anything else to say, like about Carcass CLAD or nothing else you want to let know, I guess I'll ask this, which I know this is probably the dreaded question you've got a bajillion times, and I understand it can change. But is there like a general time frame for when you think Carcass CLAD may be ready?
Not really. Like not like prohibitively far away. Like we wouldn't have chosen to announce it if we're like 5 years out. So like we're trying to get this shit done as quick as we can. But our next like thing that you can actually follow as someone who's curious is we're aiming to be at Gamescom, where we'll have like a big cool booth, and there'll probably be like some stuff coming out of that. But that's kind of the only thing that's like really like public at this point, or even really decided in the team. I don't think any of us could tell you the exact day this thing's going to come out, even if we wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're working on it.
Well, I mean, also it's just like, it's video games are an art process. So as with anything, you discover more, you learn what needs to be changed as you get into the changes of it and stuff like that. So I completely understand. I think it's, I'm pretty sure it's the Nintendo quote, but the whole like, an early game is never good, but a late game can always be good. So I'm in no rush to get it. I'm just excited for whenever that does happen. Well, I guess if that is everything, above all else, I want to say thank you all very much for taking a lot of your time to talk to me. It means a lot. Like I said, this will be posted, the whole thing probably to Wendigoon, and then like as more stuff comes in the future, if you guys want to do another interview after the game's out, that would be fantastic. And I could just say on behalf of myself and a lot of people who enjoy mouthwashing and are excited for Carcass CLAD, we really appreciate that you guys are among the storytellers making stories today. We're excited to see what you do next. So
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
is
so
there any,
much. Yeah.
absolutely, is there any final words, anything you guys want to say, or like you said, you could check you out at Gamescom if that's coming up, or anything else you want to announce?
No,
I
nothing
I
big
just
to
want
announce.
to.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna like say thank you to you for like having this interview with us, and again for the really great mouthwashing video, you and everyone who worked on that. did. It was really like great to watch. I think I've watched it fully through like 3 times myself. I just really enjoy because it was not only just the like recap of the story and the voice acting, but then also an analysis added to that, which I think is like, yeah, it was a really great video. So it's been really great talking to you.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. I I just like talking about the stories and things that interest me, and mouthwashing was certainly one of those. Thank you for making it. Well, I believe that should do it for now for everyone watching. Thank you for watching, and be sure to follow Wrong Organ on. You guys are on Twitter, I know, at least.
Yeah, we're on everything pretty much now.
Wish list.
Wish list.
Hey, that's
Wish list on
Wish
Steam.
list.
Wishlist the game.
Wish list.
You gotta
There it
pump
is.
that number.
Yeah.
You gotta,
we
like, we check like I'm on that unhealthy like obsession right now of like I like every 2 hours check the wish list number, and it started going up less than it was going up before, and it makes me unhappy. So like if you could just pump the shit out of that number, so I
we'll make it
watch
go
the
up.
grass
Aaron.
grow up, that'd be sick.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll make it
Wish
go
list
up.
again, but yeah, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok now that we have a marketing person actually putting stuff there. So we're pretty visible on all those places, and we have a Discord that if people want to join. So we'll keep pushing out what we can when it's ready.
I'll put links to all those things in the description, the wish list, the Discord, and stuff like that. So be sure to support, follow, and get excited for Carcass CLAD, because I know I am. And thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here.